Clucker. We are here. We are live. We are ready to rock. Ladies and gentlemen, freaks and geeks, you are listening to the most conscious comedy podcast in the multiverse. I took a little hiatus, but I am back. I'm black, as I like to say. Here with my main man, King Peter the Viral, one of the most conscious lads I have found on the interwebs in regards to his understanding of politics, everything that's going on. And look, one of the things I love about having a podcast, about making content, is every once in a while you stumble onto someone like yourself that is deeply knowledgeable about what's going on in the realm of technology, in the realm of conspiracies, politics, and it is such a joy speaking to someone like that. Because I got to tell you, man, I mean, I am a connected brother. I know a lot of people, but it's frustrating dealing with a lot of momos that have no understanding about what's going on in the world. So when you speak to someone that has a good understanding of history, has this passion for freedom, and has similar interests and so forth, it makes this so much fun. And obviously, doing a podcast, getting this stuff out there, this information out there is fantastic. But speaking to someone like yourself, where I learn something, we get to have in deep, tumultuous conversations. It's a lot of fun. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are feeling a little isolated right now, one of the best ways to draw people into your life is to put out what you want. You know, you attract what you are. So the more you do what you are enjoying, the more you'll draw the kind of people that you want into your life. But before we get deep into this, because there's a lot of stuff we got to cover on the crucial journey. This stuff is heating up here. 2024, the year of the dragon, is gonna be intense. Ugh. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I wanna just let everyone know I have a single coming out. I'm very excited. It's dropping on the 28th. It's my birthday, yo. I'm turning 12. And I also have an album coming out very soon. I've been working on this. I have, for a long time, since I was like a teenager, wanted to have an album. I had the name envisioned, everything about it, and I am manifesting this. It's been a long time, and I am very excited about this thing. This thing is going to be a compilation of songs I've been recording probably for about 8 or 9 years now. I released an EP about 5, 6 years ago, and I've added a whole bunch more tracks onto that. Most of the tracks are on my Spotify, but I will be adding a new track onto the album. So you guys can check that out. Stay tuned for the details. Check us out on the Spotifys, on the TikToks, and obviously on my podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, whereas you can check out my music on my TikToks and YouTubes and whatnot, on this podcast, we go deep, we go esoteric, we go into the politics, the mainstreams. We speak about all the kind of topics that people don't really want to speak about because they're politically incorrect. But ladies and gentlemen, being an artist is not just about winning the hearts of all the senoritas. It's about being willing to be different, stand for what you believe, express yourself honestly. As Bruce Lee once said, you must express yourself honestly. Now, King Peter the Viral, I wanted to pop this thing off by first and foremost saying that I feel like the world is looking towards the UK right now, particularly in light of recent events. Just the other day, I think it was General Saunders, the head of the UK Armed Forces, uh, suggested that perhaps it would be a good idea if we conscripted the young folk to join in this courageous holy war against Putin. And I have been watching all these videos pop out on the interwebs about how so many of the UK people are not in favor of this. Obviously, a lot of people are. But to me, I think it is outrageous. This is just my personal thought that in the 21st century, we are still posing this notion of conscription. I realize that this is quite common in a lot of European countries. Like I know Italy, Italy and Greece, they kind of require you to be in service to the nation, militarily speaking. But the idea of actually going to war, for most of us that have not been brought up in this environment, seems absolutely chaotic. And I made a video addressing this topic just the other night, and it went viral. I think it's around 7,000, 8,000 views at the moment. And a lot of people are responding very strongly to it. The biggest criticism I get is that I'm not, you're not from the UK. You go back to Africa. Some shit like that. Now, granted, I'm not from the UK, but I feel very passionate about issues relating to freedom. And I think this really touches at the heart of it. Because my view is that if you don't have control over your own body, decide whether or not you want to go to a country, right, and be cannon fodder, then you might as well be a slave. Anyway, enough ranting from me. King Peter, how do you feel about this? Are you going to go and join the holy war against Putin?
I don't think so, at least not on that side. And one of the most interesting points is about the degree to which young people would be willing to fight in a war like this. And there's two sides to that. There's firstly you can look at what young people generally face today, and a lot of people in the media, particularly some of the right wing GB News type media outlets, do like to sort of talk about the snowflakes and the woke snowflakes. But at the end of the day, a lot of these people are turning to these ideologies and are having all these resentments with society because of simply the circumstances they're facing, the level of education that's required, the level of experience, and salaries in proportion to rent and the rest of the cost of living. Right now, it's not like a glorious nation where we've got our big home. I got my wife and my three kids and my dog and my white picket fence, and it's all paid for by my one salary. And I've got my own business and something to hand down to the kids. And some foreign threat is coming in and threatening to disrupt our way of life. In that situation, of course, you're going to want to pick up arms and defend your country and defend your way of life. But right now, what are people realistically defending that could come under threat from Russia? Are we defending our freedoms? Because do we really have massive freedoms? There was one story that was just in the news today about a British tourist to Spain who was arrested and has just been acquitted of a public order offence. The reason why he was arrested was because he had reportedly made a bomb threat on a commercial flight. But this wasn't someone who, shouted something out in public or someone who tweeted something. He sent a private Snapchat to one of his friends where he said, about to bomb this plane right here. And it's a private communication between two people. Snapchat is supposed to be end-to-end encrypted. The plane had to be escorted by fighter jets to land in Spain, and he was arrested, and he was basically being sued by. It was a criminal trial, but he was basically being sued by the Spanish government to recoup their costs on scrambling the jets.
So wait a
But
sec. Wait,
they acquitted him.
someone intercepted his Snapchat message, like the government or whatever it is, the
The
secret
British government.
British
It
government.
came out and confirmed the British security intelligence came out and
Yeah,
intercepted. So there's something about certain keywords that are being picked up. So whatever we think is end-to-end encrypted is very much not the case. And the Spanish courts luckily said, okay, this was a private communication. This wasn't like a public threat, so we shouldn't detain him. But the government they've out and out got access to people's private and encrypted communications. Granted, they're not going to want to go through everything. They're only looking for what's of interest to them. But if they've got access to like private little jokes between friends, what else have they got access to?
sure.
Um,
Well, this is obviously old news. I mean, we've known since Edwards. I mean, we've known forever, but Edward Snowden officially, this is back in 2010, uh, opened up the floodgates and the fact that
mm,
organizations like Echelon and Nasser did have access to all our information, and essentially they were acting on that. No communications were private, so to speak. So it wouldn't surprise me that that goes on in the UK either. But I guess when you see these kind of more often than not, it's my feeling that whereas that's been going on, they don't make these trials public where they, let's say, they detain someone for transmitting some kind of information that is a threat to public health and safety or something like that, or the
yeah,
national
it's
security,
only
right?
way later
Now
down the
they're
line. You only hear it way after.
yeah, but now this stuff is very public. It's kind of like in your face. It's like how
Mm.
China does everything, you know. They just tell you that, look, you don't have any freedoms. We're going to kill you if you speak out, as opposed to the US that tries to pretend we're all about freedom. Look, mate, we're all about freedom here. What am I doing Australian accents like? I need to sound more American. Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
that
man.
I'm an American and I believe in my freedom. We all have our freedoms here, even though our government surveys everything we do. But it's just an illusion, right?
It is there is absolutely no freedom. And one of the biggest ironies about all of this, I find, is they want to conscript people and force people to take up arms and fight. Yet they're going to ban young people from smoking. They're banning tobacco products for anyone born after the year 2014 or something. And the biggest irony of all of that, if you look past, regardless of obviously smoking is an unhealthy habit and everything, but firstly, there's the philosophical argument you should have the freedom to choose. But secondarily, a lot of the money that we need for our crippled NHS comes from people, the massive tobacco duties that people pay on cigarettes. We saw in South Africa and neighboring countries during the pandemic when they banned cigarettes and alcohol non-essential goods, all that happened was that all the regular plugs people go to get weed or whatnot, they're suddenly selling all the alcohol and all the cigarettes, and anyone can go and get cigarettes. Everyone's still smoking cigarettes. There's just no taxes paid to the government. The government is just losing out on revenue. And the other big irony about it all is that it was proposed by the Conservative government, who were elected by the British public to be conservative and free market, yada, yada, yada. And yet it's a policy that was introduced by Jacinda Ardern's radically left-wing government, and it's a radically left-wing and authoritarian policy which goes against the manifesto they were elected on. So, what kind of democracy do people really want to fight for? They can fight for their authoritarian, tyrannical hellhole where they can't even buy a cigarette. They can't even, because now they're cracking down on zombie knives again. You can't even buy a pointy enough blade, but yet you're compelled to take up arms and kill innocent people because the leader of that country has had a dispute with one of the neighbors over the territorial legal status of specific territories where the people inside are conflicted about who they want to align with. It's got nothing to do with us. We don't need to
Absolutely.
step in there and flex NATO's bollocks for them. It's
Absolutely.
ridiculous.
I wanted to go back to the point you made earlier, just in regards to how if this was a real threat, let's say Russia was invading the UK, a lot of people would want to take up arms and defend their country, right? The argument I think here that someone like General Sanders is making is that this could potentially lead to a world war where the UK has to be involved. Now, the threat right now is that, from my understanding, the UK doesn't have enough active soldiers. Now, most people, I just don't feel like they want to join the military in this day and age. I mean, one of the things you got to give credit for the millennials and the Generation Z people out there is they kind of have this understanding that war is a ruckus, and what is this? Actually, war is yeah, war is just full of shit, basically, And
Mm.
ultimately, I don't think any sane person wants to go and drop bombs on innocent people, right? And that obviously is why a lot of people aren't joining. But in terms of the threat, there is an argument to be made that what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia could eventually spill into a world war. I can see other neighboring countries getting involved. And if obviously the UK is at threat, then what do we do as a people? Now, of course, I fundamentally believe that if you want to sit on the sidelines, you have a right to do so. But the argument to be made is that as a citizen, as a as a subject of the king, you have a duty to uphold the virtues of this country. How can you call yourself a Brit, if you are not willing to fight for your own country?
I mean, realistically, who wants to go and fight for Charles? I mean, if this is going to be published, I have to be careful with what I say so I don't get sued or whatever but everybody knows it. Everybody knows, you know, everything about this guy. He's a complete creep. Everyone knows about the Jimmy Savile communications, and if people do their digging, they know what direction that all points in. They know
But
about all the stuff
who
with
isn't a creep
Diana.
though in politics in this day and age? Particularly, I mean, when we say
Mm.
creep, I mean you have a look at the Epstein Client List, right? And I actually made a
Mm.
video making a joke about how I was kind of annoyed I wasn't on the list because only from the perspective that every person of influence and substance in the 21st century, we've had Leonardo DiCaprio, we've had David Copperfield, all the big players, they're on that list, right? It's kind of almost synonymous with being someone of substance, like being a sketchy person to go on that island, like, but in order to be important, relevant in this day and age, it almost seems as if it comes with this sketchy attitude that is just seems to be seems to be required of these people. Obviously, I'm saying this jokingly, but I guess when you're comparing the caliber of politicians out there, there really isn't that much to go off. I mean, granted, you could say someone like King Charles is a sketchy person, but what other role models do we have in politics that you'd actually look up to right now?
Well, right now, I don't know. I mean, I stopped caring about British politics when I read the Green Book by Gaddafi, a guy who's been massively demonized by the West. But actually reading his philosophy or his breakdown of representative democracies, it makes complete sense in that people don't really have a choice over individual decisions. What we have is a sort of a false representation of democracy, where we've realistically there's party politics that prevents anyone from rising to the top who's a genuine candidate and an outsider. And within these parties, we've got a choice between one or the other candidate, and it's whichever one we like the better. But we don't have a choice over individual policy decisions. Should we go to war with this country? Should we introduce a ban on cigarettes? Should we raise taxes? We don't have any individual choice. And it was the system that Gaddafi proposed, and people can argue about whether or not he fulfilled it. But it was a system where he divided the country up into many people's congresses, whereby every single man and woman over the age of 21 was effectively an MP in their own constituency. They had their own miniature elected government that they every member would elect every 4 years or something, who would then represent in the national parliament. But effectively, most autonomy was given to these regions. So everyone had a vote over every single thing that was done with their money. And as a result, there was great equity in terms of distribution of loans, standard of living increased massively, and all of these policies that we aren't told about. Simply, the Western education just doesn't fill in blanks. It creates this sort of illusion that makes people think that the West, obviously, it's a self-serving system, and you can't disagree with it for that reasons. But simply, you're looking at the Russia-Ukraine example. We are only told to focus on what may be a threat, what could spin out into a global conflict,
Mhm.
based on what they want us to look at. So right now, it's convenient to look at this. So every little thing is going to be spun in a certain direction. There was a headline earlier today about Putin, which said that Putin is provoking NATO by visiting Kaliningrad, and that's literally part of Russia. It's just separate from Russia. It's between Poland and Estonia or something, and they simply by visiting his own territory, the media can flag that up, and then certain people in the public are going to view that and think, "Oh my goodness, Putin is like the new Hitler. He's rattling his sabers. We need to crack down on him." But at the end of the day, it's simply because they want us to focus on that. Is the only reason why anyone focuses on it, or why it seems significant. If they wanted us to focus on the tensions last year in the Balkans between, with Serbia and Kosovo, that could have potentially escalated into a war. Because Serbia is very much Russian oriented, and we're supporting Kosovo in violation of international law in some regards. And that was even what the First World War was created over. But it wasn't created over like legitimate philosophical reasons. It was created over what was advantageous to advancing the powers, whether that's monetary or geopolitical of those in power.
Obviously, it's always about money, power, control. What I wanted to touch on was the point you were making there in regards to the book by Gaddafi about how democracy could be set up in a way where it was more in line with what I think is called direct democracy. The first time I've I came across that idea, I was actually watching a Star Wars episode, I think it was Obi-Wan, where they discovered this planet where they actually had a direct democracy in place and everyone gets to vote on certain issues. And I think that's much better. I think the problem with the current democratic system is the idea is you vote for someone. And now, my understanding, particularly after listening to people like Vivek make this their number one topic throughout the campaign, is that most of these candidates are beholden to these super PACs, deals with whoever essentially like that these people essentially bought and paid for, and they just are making decisions based off of whoever is giving them the most amount of money, right? So whereas you might vote for someone thinking they're going to be in line with what you think you want, they'll end up voting for things that you're completely not in favor of and are simply supporting the ideas that they're beholden to by the people that are giving them these super PACs and so forth. But my point I wanted to get into was that whereas I think that's much better to have a direct democracy, my problem is that the concept of democracy that we currently have in the modern world is not in line with what I would refer to as classical democracy, or at least within the confines of what I'd call a protectorate. Because clearly, I don't believe you should be able to vote on everything, or maybe in the definition of democracy that a lot of people adopt, maybe you can, right? But my understanding is that there are certain things dealing with individual freedoms that you should not be able to vote for. For instance, if we wanted to vote that there should be no free black people in our society. And if we had a 51% majority saying, well, let's do that, let's go back to life a couple of hundred years ago and have black slaves, obviously it would not be moral. But the problem is that the way things are set up, there's no delineation between what I would call an actual public issue, for instance, dealing with how we use our resources, dealing with whether or not we use our combine resources to focus on one thing. We're debating issues dealing with our actual inalienable rights, like whether or not we get to leave our homes, whether or not we get to go and fight in a war. This is absolute insanity, in my opinion. And I don't think this is in line with at least the libertarian ideal of democracy, right? Because you make a separation between democratic issues versus individual freedoms. I mean, if that's what democracy is in this day and age, I think it's very, very concerning. What are your thoughts, bro?
I mean, I think the cause of many of those problems is in nations like the UK, the lack of a written constitution. And in nations where there is a constitution, it's either inefficiencies within that constitution or the courts not respecting it.
Courts,
So
yeah, exactly.
that's been one of the or abusing it. That was one of the big issues in the United States, that it seems like depending on whichever a political party has the most Supreme Court justices in place, they can interpret the Constitution whichever way they like to create whichever their party's political agenda is. It's simply using principles not for their intended purpose, rather just simply for self-advantage, which it's not, it's human nature, but it's an inadequacy in the system if it doesn't have the correct checks and balances in place to prevent those things from happening.
Well, I
And
want to push
when
back on that point just a bit there, and the idea that it's human nature to use principles to further our own needs. I mean, I suppose you can say that, but to me, I think it to me it's just something people do when they want something. Like
Mm.
the idea
Or it's
that,
more broadly
yeah,
self-advantage. It's sort of, well, I mean, it's just more broadly
but it's
self-advantage is human interest. So
yeah,
if there's a way of sort of in a situation advantaging ourselves, like when rather than destroying ourselves, like we're gonna, whatever we do, we do a job, we do it at the end of the day to get money. If we so there is self-advantage. It is usually a manipulative thing to take advantage of things that are in place and pluck around at what the specifics of a word is to twist it in a certain way rather
exactly.
than just
That's
going
what
with
I
the
wanted
flow.
to get
Yeah.
to. Like, call it what you will. Some people do it, some people don't. But ultimately, it's just being dishonest. People will obfuscate the meaning of words in order to achieve their ends. This is what we see going on with constitutional violations all around the world. Certain governments just ignore the letter of the law and just do what they want to do in order to further their goals. And the thing is, deep down, they know what they're doing. And granted, there's some people that say it's human nature, but the reality is it's just that there are some people that just don't really respect those principles. And as a result, we fall into this world of tyranny where there is no letter of the law that is really upheld. People, governments just do what they want for security. And I wanted to touch on this
Absolutely.
issue, yeah, because it falls into what's going on right now with the World Economic Forum, where
Mm.
we have these people in power that are essentially trying to change the current structure of constitutionals constitutional laws in general around different countries, right, in order to achieve their ends. And they're making this argument that society can't continue with this current model. And what's really interesting is recently there was a forum at the World Economic Forum. Obviously, I don't know how often this goes on, but one of the one of the people that was invited to speak at this event was the recently elected Argentinian, is it prime minister or president that they have there. And what's interesting is that he spoke very vehemently against this entire agenda where the collectivists are trying to uh, obfuscate the current constitutions in play to bring about this new world order, this great reset program. And it is so refreshing to hear someone speak so openly about this. In fact, I wanted to kind of just pivot to the speech that this guy gave. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's so wacky because at this forum, typically you see people that are all on the same page, all sharing the same vision.
Mm.
You don't really have many dissenters. They all speak. They may have very few differences of opinions on subtle issues, but it's rare that you will see someone that is so against the agenda to speak openly call these guys out for what they're doing. Yeah, you guys are a bunch of commies. This whole, we're doing this for the greater good. We've heard this before. We tried this in our country. And I'm going to play you the speech, right? Like, I want to share the screen because it really addresses what is going on around the world right now, not just in terms of, well, in terms of politics, democracy. I mean, this is how this shit is obfuscated. And I think it's really relevant. So check this out, bro. I don't know if you've seen this speech, but let me know if you have.
No,
This
I
is
haven't seen this one. Not in full. I've heard briefly about this, but it's my
all
first
right.
time watching it.
Can you see my screen, by the way? I'm not sure if you have you
Yep,
tried.
I
Oh
can
yeah,
see
yeah,
this now.
sweet, sweet. All right, check this out.
To inform you that the Western world is facing a significant because those who are supposed to defend the values of the Western world co-opted by a worldview that inevitably leads to socialism and consequently to poverty and economic deprivation. Unfortunately, in recent decades, motivated by some well-intentioned desires to help others and others by the desire to belong to a privileged caste, the main leaders of the Western world have abandoned the model of freedom for different versions of what we call collectivism. We are here to tell you that collectivist experiments are never the solution to the problems that afflict the citizens of the world, but rather they are their cause. Trust me, there is no one better than us Argentines to provide testimony on these two issues. When we embraced freedom in 1860, in 35 years we became the world's first dominant power. 35 years we became the first world power. While when we embraced collectivism, over the past 100 years, we saw how our citizens began to systematically impoverish themselves until they fell to the 140th position in the world. But before we can have this discussion, it would be important for us to first look at the data that supports why free market capitalism is not only a possible system to end world poverty, but also the only morally desirable system to achieve it. If we consider the history of economic progress, we can see how from year zero until
It's
about
refreshing.
per capita GDP remained practically constant throughout the reference period. If one looks at a chart of the evolution of economic growth throughout human history, one would be seeing a chart with the shape of a hockey stick, an exponential function that remained constant for 90% of the time and exponentially shoots up from the sole exception to the start of the century.
This is good.
If one analyzes the data, what is observed is that growth has been accelerating throughout the entire period. During the entire period between year zero and 1800, the per capita GDP growth rate remained stable at around 0.02% annually. That is practically without growth. From 19th century, with industrial revolution,
All right.
growth rate reaches.
So I won't go into the whole spiel that he goes into here, but it's refreshing because this guy not only breaks down the economics as to why capitalism works and why this collectivist system is a bad idea, but he goes into the immorality of it and speaks openly in regards to how this stuff is a complete direct violation of the laws that were essentially set up in so many of these countries. Let me not sure if I'm on my stop sharing screen. You can see me now. Yeah, and I guess the big question to me is how the hell someone like that gets invited to the World Economic Forum? Because I'm sure that these people are not inviting just anyone, right? Like you need to be typically wealthy and you need to be in the club in order to speak at these forums. So, and it's not like this guy's position is not well known. I mean, this guy has been campaigning as very libertarian, from what I understand, president of Argentina. So it's so weird the fact that this guy. Do you think they knew that he was going to speak about this? He was going to make that kind of
I
address.
think so. I think they must have done, but I think I mean kudos to them for giving him a platform, but at the same time, it's good PR to just be seen to because I mean they had a degree of self-awareness when too many people clocked on to all the "Welcome to 2030, I have no privacy and life has never been better" articles. They took all that stuff down. They've scrubbed the internet of any trace of the Great Reset stuff. And they clearly realized that what they were doing before wasn't working, and so they need to get some more goodwill with the public with legitimate discussions, and therefore they can say they've at least entertained other ideas, and they therefore know that they've got the right way forward. But they will always find a way to those kind of organizations will always find a way to justify their existence and to justify the powers behind them. And it's nothing new. The point you're making before the speech about international law,
Mm,
it's what all these financial organizations have been doing throughout at least since the Second World War, since the so-called decolonization period. Countries like the World Economic Forum, not well, sorry, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, all these sort of global financial systems. Kwame Nkrumah actually wrote the enslaving chains of the World Bank, and how these nations they take control, they offer very high interest loans and great financial packages, but they tie in all these conditions about how the money is to be spent and how which as a result influences the policy of the country, and therefore it ceases to be a completely independent nation. So when Kwame Nkrumah was taken out in a CIA-backed coup, his their immediate replacements were an American-backed government that immediately took out World Bank loans and sold themselves to the World Bank. And conditions included selling all the hospitals, the airports, the schools, and privatizing all the industry that Kwame Nkrumah had built up himself through his ambitious policies. So it's a case of if you take one step out of line or you step too far out of line, they will smack you down and take you out. But so long as you're not too much of a threat to the ideas they have in place, then they can live with you.
well said, bro. It's astonishing to hear your knowledge on these topics. I would often hear my dad speak about this. You mentioned Client Nkrumah. He was a Ghanaian, right? My dad would speak a lot about this.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, my dad was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and he actually fled, due to a coup d'etat. And I have a feeling he actually met him. Like he met a lot of these figures, and he'd often speak about the politics. Obviously, I was a very young kid at the time, but I I find it interesting how like all of this stuff, there's nothing new in regards to it. Like the tactics that are used by these powers essentially to strangle these countries. Like what we're seeing in Africa right now, I know that one of the countries has revolted against the colonialist, very what would be the word for it? Oh,
Like neo-colonial.
yeah, neo-colonial. Some of the tactics that are used, a lot of the monetary policies, things that you were speaking about that have been used in some of these countries in Africa, have obviously weakened these countries. And there's a particular figure in somewhere in West Africa, I forget the name of the country, that has started this uprising where he's basically trying to form some alliance, some kind of like African United Nations. It sounds crazy, right? But they're basically saying enough is enough. We're claiming our land. We're not gonna be paying any of this tax, any of this bullshit to the French, to any of you white colonialists, and we're taking back our power. And it's look, I mean, it's crazy to see something like this popping off in Africa, but it's probably about time.
Well, in every time it's been tried before, whoever tries to lead the movement ends up being hit by a NATO bullet. So
Yeah,
uh,
it's true.
it's
But
it's
this
it's a
guy,
dangerous game.
well, the different. Okay, I think it's actually I want to say Burkina Faso. Don't quote me, but I guess the difference now is that these people have backing by Russia. So this is the main thing. So at the moment,
Yes,
Russia
yes.
has actually shown a lot of support towards these nations. As we know, Russia is a superpower, which is a very interesting conversation right now, which kind of touches on why maybe you guys need to get conscripted, right? Because you're not dealing with some country full of brown people that can't defend themselves, I know like Afghanistan or Iraq right now. No, you were dealing
Mm.
with a country that has nuclear weapons, that has extremely advanced air power, military, and this is another thing I heard. Apparently, the standing army of Russia is well over 1 million or something like that. Whereas, look,
Yeah.
bro, you guys have got squat. So if Russia wanted to go to war, or if Russia's got your back, well, you feel like you can get away with a lot. And this is how the politics always works, right? It's like no country wants to do shit unless, of course, they can flex due to their military power, due to their nuclear weapons, due to being backed by Russia. This is one of the reasons why Iran right now is trying so hard to get nuclear weapons. Last I heard, they're about 12 months away. This is what the West is saying from developing functional nuclear weapons. All right. They probably have them. I don't know. And obviously, what we can take from what's happened around the world is that the United States of America typically don't mess with any country that has nuclear weapons, right? They say, "Oh, look, you guys should disarm, look, please, please don't have your nuclear weapons, all that kind of stuff, right?" And what I've generally seen is that they'll be very respectful if that country has nuclear weapons or they suspect that they have nuclear weapons. But when they don't have nuclear weapons, the approach is, "Oh, we'll just blow the shit out of you. Look, get the fuck out of there." And there's this ridiculous hubris because the United States, as we know, has nuclear weapons. They have more weapons of mass destruction, many times fold than all the other countries around the world combined, right? But they're saying, "Hey, look, man, look, it's dangerous for you to get any power." It's like, look, I don't want you getting a big stick right now because look, you guys are not sophisticated enough. And it's like, what the fuck? Who the hell made you king and ruler of the world? It's like you get to decide how much power we have because you consider us a threat. Well, have a look at what you've been doing. You have hundreds of bases all around the world, and you actually have bombarded the shit out of all of these countries in the last 100 years. And you have the audacity to tell us that, well, you don't want us to get these weapons because you might misbehave and bomb countries. What the fuck is that?
Exactly. I mean, even down to the fact that they have these international laws around nuclear weapons, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in which countries are approved to have them.
Yeah.
Israel has nuclear weapons in violation of the
Oh,
Non-Proliferation Treaty.
yeah.
So, and that's just an open secret. So to be honest, if Israel can do it, then why not Iran? Like there's the reason why Iran is such a radical and in many ways oppressive Islamic State is they came into existence through oppression and through being completely coerced by Western countries. They tried to create an independent parliament free of British and Russian influence back in the early 20th century. Britain and Russia teamed up to bomb it. Then in World War II, we invaded alongside Russia and forced the Shah to abdicate, installed his son as the second Shah, as basically a puppet Shah for the West. And then when the Iranian people elected a prime minister who was more socialist leaning, he tried to nationalize Iranian oil assets, and Britain and America responded by launching Operation Ajax, which was a fake coup which removed the prime minister of Iran. They then installed a puppet leader who was, again, just a puppet to the Shah, who was a puppet to the states. And there was no democracy whatsoever. So all the people of Iran were, okay, the system is messed up right now. We need to install something new. They all kind of overthrew the government, but they left a power vacuum that was only filled by the biggest radical element, which was people who were made especially radical by the oppression that they're facing. When people look at the situation in Gaza and people look at Hamas, a lot of these people have grown up. Being born in what's effectively a concentration camp, the Gaza Strip, and being deprived of resources. Your buddy from childhood has been detained for throwing rocks at an Israeli car, and he's been locked up in a secret Israeli prison against all international law with no chance of ever seeing him again. And your family were killed by Israel. Your home was taken away by Israel. You're forced into this small squalid property because all of your ancestral homeland and all of your family's previous properties were colonized by Israel and burned to the ground and ethnically cleansed. And so how can you blame people who then get very, very warped, very radical, violent ideas? It's simply a product of their environment, what's created them, and that's another thing that you even see in society, even in the UK, for example, or America, gang warfare and things like that. How individuals who are born in certain economic circumstances, their whole family, based on the housing estate they live in, it's all affiliated with certain street gang, and their families are all part of a street gang, and they're all their friends. And at an early age, someone who well, your best friend, your cousin, whoever it is killed by a rival gang, you're going to see them as the enemy, and you become very bloodthirsty, dehumanize them. As you can listen, if you've ever heard any London drill music, some of it can be very, very bloodthirsty in terms of the lyrics. And that hate is fueled by experience. And then the people from the other gang's perspective, you're a young up and comer in the other gang, someone is just killed off in a retaliatory hit. You then see the other gang, and it becomes this cycle of violence, self-perpetuating violence, rather than understanding. And it seems like these Western countries are just throwing more and more fuel onto the fire in situations in the Middle East, everywhere else in the world, situations in Africa. There's a reason why all of these countries in Western Africa are becoming more pally with Russia. I mean, looking at Mali specifically, they had French peacekeepers out there, and there was simply been too much conflict. If you look at the history between France and parts of Africa, it's not a nice history. So eventually, the Malian government kicked out the French and brought in Wagner Group, and since the coup, of course, now it's direct Russian forces who are having to sort of keep the peace in some of these African nations, and it's goodwill, and it's a much more effective strategy for Russia, because they're increasing their goodwill around the world and their influence without stealing and pillaging resources and shooting people and taking away their freedoms and putting them in financial slavery. And the West just doesn't seem to be able to sort of get on the same page. And it's also advantageous for these African countries to have that backing from like one of the world's biggest superpowers. So
Absolutely.
it's a win-win situation.
You touch on such a salient point here, and I wanted to expand on this a little. And this deals with how, more often than not, these horrible situations are created circumstantially in the sense that we're seeing a lot of war, a lot of pain in these countries because they're brought up in a horrible environment, lacking money and so forth. I listened to an interview with Basim on Valuetainment where it was tumultuous, it was hardcore, where one of the hosts was saying that, look, you have to look at all the other countries though, right? In the Middle East that are doing very, very well. Because he was trying to make the argument that the issue between Israel and Palestine has to do with the fact that, well, maybe it's about wealth. You have a look at surrounding Middle Eastern countries that are quite wealthy and they don't have all these problems. And maybe Israel or Palestine's problem would be addressed if the Palestinians were addressed their problem economically, right? Like he was making out this whole issue to be about money, right? And Basim exploded about this because the underlying reason as to why, according to him, and I tend to agree, that Palestine is fucked up. Because he was making the argument, look at countries like, I don't know, uh, Egypt. What are some wealthy countries like Dubai and so
In
forth,
Saudi
right?
Arabia,
It's
yeah.
absolutely, they don't have all these horrible, horrible problems, in relation to people
They've
dying and
also
so forth.
always been backed by Britain and backed by the West.
Absolutely. And Basim made the point quite appropriately that the reason why this country is so poverty stricken is because of the policies that have been implemented, right? Or because the fact that they're going, like, it's not like they were the instigators of this war that has created this fucked up situation. I mean, obviously they're poor, but it's kind of like, what came first? Was it the fact that these people were just very warlike and wanted to focus on war, therefore they lost all their money, or because they were attacked or someone did something bad to them, which left them in a situation where they weren't able to develop themselves and so forth? And I think the heart of this is that a lot of the times there are these policies that are in place, whether it's in Iraq. I mean, you have a look at why Iraq became such a fucked up place, right? I mean, before the war started by the United States, it was actually uh, a very affluent country. It had medical standards in line with first world countries, and obviously it's been decimated. The same can be said for a lot of countries before they were bombarded by the United States. And I think you can make a similar argument in regards to Palestine and Israel. And I want to get into this a little. I'm always a little kind of trepidatious dealing with this topic because, look, man, well, I feel like it's a little different than talking about, let's say, the whole COVID agenda, right? Because
Hmm.
I mean, obviously, YouTube is going to have a go at you with that stuff. But um, how can I say this? At the end of the day, there are obviously very influential, powerful people that will
Hmm.
attack you if you say the wrong kind of stuff. And I just want to say first and foremost that I am a Jew supremacist. Like seriously, I no, no, I was thinking about this. Like I'm very much attracted to Jewish people, like, but women particularly. Like that, there's just something I find really attractive about Jew. No, it's not the Jew money. I thought about this. I mean, sometimes it is kind of like because there's this air of like mysteriousness in the same way that I think a lot of white people they're interested in black guys because of oppression, all this kind of shit. They're intrigued by them. I've always been intrigued by Jewish people because there's this whole story of the Holocaust. So I fucking love Jews, and I'm not just saying that. If you're Jewish, hit us up. I love how you people say hummus. Fucking love it. It's fucking hot. That being said, right, in the same way that I am critical of black people when they do fucked up shit, right? Like I don't play this pol racial identity politics bullshit. I look at just what is going on in terms of factuality. I don't care about your race. And when I look at the Palestine, the Israeli situation, whereas I'm a little apprehensive of commenting in regards to the historical context, right, of what's going on, um, I can definitively say that what is being done by one side, like I can call out the horrible things that have been done by the Israelis, but I can also call out the horrible things that have been done by Hamas. And I feel like a lot of people just won't do that. But first and foremost, I think what is going on unequivocally in Palestine right now is a genocide. The idea of bombarding people in their homes and saying that you're just trying to take out Hamas in violation of international law, targeting hospitals using the argument that, well, Hamas is hiding there, that is absolute insanity. And to me, the justification that I hear a lot, and I always make a distinction, I don't generalize with this kind of shit, but I've noticed a lot of Israeli people make the argument that this stuff is justified because, well, they're not directly trying they're not trying to kill Palestinians, but they're just bombing the shit out of their homes. And because Hamas are believed to be there, it's justified. And at the moment, in terms of figures, because this is where this shit gets real. Last time I checked, it's about 3 weeks ago, over 30,000 Palestinians have been killed since the airstrikes that this whole thing popped
It's
off. Now,
genocide.
granted,
It's a
absolutely
genocide.
it is. And look, we can go and we can talk about what Hamas did, all that kind of shit, and I'll be critical of it. Like the whole idea of targeting civilians is a no-no for me. Now, I've heard some people make the argument that Israelis essentially they're all enrolled for military service, so they're not citizens, And look, I don't like the idea of discriminately attacking people that haven't directly done anything, that just uh, tangentially in league with within a power structure. Therefore, you're going to
I
make them
do
complicit.
agree.
Yeah, but
I,
but I will say that that was absolutely wrong, unequivocally. I don't know in regards to the truth about heads being chopped up, all that kind of stuff. That's a very dubious claim, but without a doubt, for someone to come and indiscriminately kill children, people purely because you're occupying a land, that's not acceptable. I can call both of these things out, but for some reason, a lot of people can't do that stuff, and yeah, I just feel as if first and foremost, what is going on in Palestine? I do actually side with the Palestinians because from what I understand, and I'm happy to have my thoughts changed here, but from what I understand, they were essentially driven out of their land. I mean, this is just going off of like what happened during the what's it called the Nakba, something like that. Like the fact
Nakba,
that
yeah.
so many of these people were displaced, right? And this was under the behest of the British rulership, where we are the Brits, we get to decide what goes on. So that being said, I do understand that there were Palestinians and Israelis that were living within the land at the time, and I find it very difficult to make a definitive statement that you have to be removed from that country just because you are one particular race. Like I think you have to look at it on an individual basis, which gets very tricky, right? Like, do you have a claim to that land? But as soon as you play the game, well, I'm Palestinian, my ancestors lived here, therefore I'm entitled to this land. That becomes very, very squirmish. These are my thoughts. Like I realize it's a very complicated issue, but unequivocally, first and foremost, I think Israel needs to, I believe, I know definitively, Israel needs to stop bombing the shit out of Israel. Sorry, bombing the shit out of Palestine, obviously. And
Mm.
I think it's not a justifiable thing to do. What are your thoughts, man? Like, because I appreciate the fact that you're so well researched on this topic. I am someone that has very strong principles, morally speaking, in regards to what's going on. but I am still learning a lot about this particular issue because it's such a deep issue historically.
It's definitely it's there is some nuance to the whole issue.
Mm,
Um, but right now the situation is very clear that Israel is trying to annex the rest of Gaza. Some of their ministers have come out and said that from the river to the sea it will all be Israel. And they're currently living on occupied land. Whether this is just simply a matter of principle of who occupied the land for the longest, or if it's an issue of international law, the borders that were agreed. Israel has always constantly taken more and more and more land from its neighbors, and left the Palestinians with virtually nothing. And it does all go back to Britain and the Nakba even earlier during the First World War. And um, a lot of the Zionist congresses of the late 19th century did sort of outline their plan very clearly, and they all kind of manifested exactly as they were planned, in the same kind of time span as they were planned in the late 19th century, all in accordance with sort of various world events and things that have happened. And of course, I'm not going to go into the finances of the world wars, but they're definitely topics that are worth looking into with in some depth, because there's a lot more to these wars than have ever been taught in school, and it is all accessible in many books published on those particular matters. But the Palestinian people have lived in this territory for a long, long, long time. And it's the same argument that if you say the Palestinians are wrong to say, my grandfather lived on this territory, therefore it's my territory. The argument from the Zionists was, this my great 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 to the power of 12 grandfather lived on this territory 3,500 years ago, and then he was kicked out by the Babylonians, and then the Persians let them come back in, and then according to some of the reports of the constructing the second temple, they basically destroyed their own temple so they didn't have to pay taxes. And then the Romans drove them out, and then for thousands of years they were occupied by well, obviously the local Palestinian people from neighboring Middle Eastern territories, and they were fought over for thousands of years by all of the world's armies in all of the most powerful countries of varying cultures, and all of the world's financial systems basically took shape around these conflicts, in terms of global banking and whatnot. And all of the most powerful rulers and even churches were involved in fighting over this territory. It's the most valuable territory in the world, and I think that we could have a better way of settling this matter than which group is chosen by God in our interpretation of the Old Testament.
Absolutely. I want to stop you right there because I absolutely love when someone makes a salient, superior argument to me in any kind of situation like that. And this particular point is so brilliant. The fact that there is a lot of nuance to this, like who has the highest claim over this land and so forth. And I love the fact that you've obviously thought about this. I don't know if this is a product of you being a law student and political commentator, but you're so well researched and you understand the underlying issue about this, like claim to land, because this is something I think about a lot. Because I don't think I hate the concept of, well, generalizations. Like people always speak in synecdoche, right? Like they say, well, I'm Palestinian, therefore I represent my entire people, and my entire people were in ownership of this land. But you may not, like, you may not be actually connected to any people yourself that had claim over this land. So I always try to get specific about this shit. And the fact that you're making this point in regards to who had, if you go back far enough, and I'm sure a lot of the Israelis could make this claim because they make the argument that many, many thousands of years ago, I don't know the actual time period, but that they had claim and so forth. And there needs to be a, a way of identifying on an individual or a more individual like basis, right? Who has claim ownership? Because look, I mean, this is how I look at it. Because if we unless we settle it this way, we have to just side with the fact that one group, it's never going to be definitively a clear cut thing. One group of people, may it be the Palestinians or Israelis, are going to make this argument that is never clear. It's always based on generalizations that they have claim based on something that happened. And anytime you move into the realm of generalities, which is what we do when we speak about politics, you can't have a definitive answer. This is why on this particular topic, I don't believe there is a clear cut answer because it's like the point you made. It's like who owned this land? how many thousands of years ago? And I just love the fact that you brought that into the paradigm here, because if we're really going to get to the heart of this problem, this is why it is so nuanced. Granted, some people start with the Nakba, but a lot of Israelis make the point that you can go back further. But the most stupid argument, which you actually made reference to, right, which annoys me, I got into an argument with a friend of mine just a while ago where we exploded with this conversation. It's one of the few things we've disagreed on for a long time. And I loved it because he was so passionate about this. And I love when people are honest about what they believe and they still are respectful. He made the point, though, that depending on whether, as a Christian, you believe that the Holy Land is entitled to the Palestinians or the Israelis, that will decide who is right. Now, as a rational, logical person, now I believe in God. I have, I was brought up as a Christian, right? But I believe in reason being the highest kind of truth. To make that argument, right, that based on what you believe in the future is dictated by God, right? So depending on what God has dictated, and that's something that is unknowable, right? That's going to determine whether or not Palestine or Israel should be in control of the land. So we have to go with an unknowable, right? Like what God has declared. This kind of like nonsensical argumentation. And it is my contention that, well, my friend definitely believed this, but I believe this is an established viewpoint that a lot of people hold to. They believe religiously that that land has been declared the land of the Palestinians or the Israel. I think this is actually a common idea I held by some Israelis, right? And this is the issue, and this I believe ties into the concept of, well, Zionism to some extent. Like a lot of people actually believe that they are rightfully the bearers of this land, but from what I understand, this actually very much goes against the Judaic tradition, like the idea of wanting to claim this land as yours. Like from what I understand, and I'm obviously not an expert on this, so if you were listening to this and you are a Israeli scholar of some sort, please enlighten me. But this conversation is very interesting to me, and I know you're someone that's very learned on this topic. Let's talk about Zionism, brother. This is where it goes.
Hmm.
Oh, I may have a target on my head. Molly, I love you, Jews. You're my favorite. You're my favorite race. You guys are the superior race. I love you. Come on, I'm a Jewish supremacist. So don't take me down. But let's talk about Zionism if they're here, bro. How do you understand Zionism?
I mean, Zionism, as far as I'm aware of it, is sort of the movement for reestablishing Israel as it's outlined in the Old Testament or the Torah. So it's a movement that sort of it's been around for a number of centuries, but it really exploded in the late 19th century, and there were sort of various international groups for it, and that was when a number of major Jewish multinational groups became obviously more outspoken and supportive of the cause. And it was largely, I mean, at first people didn't really know exactly how it was going to operate. It sort of really came into being during the First World War, or at least the sort of modus operandi by how it would be obtained, sort of really began to sort of take shape in the First World War when Britain, it was in particular one a Jewish Zionist cabinet minister of ours by the name of Herbert Samuel. He signed the what's known as the Samuel Memorandum on the future of Palestine, and he presented this to the British government, and they accepted the proposal. And it was basically a system that, or a promise to. And I feel like even just talking about this is going to have me labeled as something, but this is literally the nature of the deal. It was a proposal to the world Jewish banks and various Zionists in power and in banking and finance throughout the world, who have access to an enormous amount of capital, like the Rothschilds and other sort of big banking families, that would request global Jewish support for Britain's war effort in exchange for the territory of Palestine to create a new home for the Jewish people. And that policy was formalized in the Balfour Declaration, which was literally signed to Lord Rothschild by Arthur Balfour, our Foreign Secretary at the time, because Rothschild was at the time the chairman of the British the board of deputies of the Council of British Jews, or whatever they're called, the bigger, powerful lobby group in the country. And but one of the things that makes it a little bit more dodgy is that the reason why Britain was able to win against the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East was through making deals with various Arab groups, proposing the Arab revolts. Those kind of systems created countries like Saudi Arabia, and its neighbors through um, British backing, um, in exchange for them basically revolting against the powers that be in the Ottoman Empire. But at the same time, we were destabilizing and supporting revolutions in other countries. Well, right on our doorstep, there was in 1916 there was the Irish uprising, the Rebellion, which we just swarmed into Dublin and bombed the ever-loving snot out of it
Mm.
to put down this rebellion because we couldn't lose control of our own people. In fact, there was a famous bloke. I think his name was Roger Casement. I'll have to check on that, but he was an Irish fellow, very much accepted by the British establishment for his journalism and public activism, exposing the wrongs perpetuated by foreign empires. So not the British Empire, but he was the one who really exposed to the West what was going on in the Belgian
Mm.
Congo and the sort of torture and human rights violations over there. But during the First World War, the British establishment caught wind of him being a little bit too pally with the Germans in their support of the Irish cause, because naturally he's going to support his own people's liberation. And what the establishment did before he could do anything publicly, they pressed treason charges. Because the British public actually liked this fellow, the way they got the British public to hate him was they leaked his diary, and it's unknown if it's real or if it's forgery. But generally speaking, most historians believe it was genuine. But they leaked pages from his diary that alluded to homosexual conduct that he involved himself in. And because of public attitudes, the government were able to basically drum this up into, oh, this guy he's a filthy homosexual degenerate who's a traitor to this country, and therefore he must be executed. And through their sort of bad PR campaign, they were able to get the public to be completely apathetic to his hanging that took place about a year later. A true
Mm.
advocate of human rights and justice who can be executed simply for speaking about the wrong issues in geopolitics. It's the game that they've always been playing this whole time.
No doubt. Where all that stuff is really fascinating. I just want to get a bit of clarity in regards to Zionism without going into the history, the protocols laid out, and so forth. Because Zionism as a concept, at least in my mind, is very clear. It deals with how to look at a lot of definitions for this. Generally speaking, it deals with the idea of making Israel a homeland of the Jewish people. That's, in a nutshell, how I understand it to be and how I believe. And I've heard many experts refer to this. I've heard Israelis talk a bit more about, the fact that Israel has a claim to have a country of its own. But fundamentally, we're speaking about the idea of Israel being the homeland of the Jews. Jews are obviously claiming this land as theirs and being able to have their own country, sovereignty, all that kind of stuff, right? The issue I have is that very much what I often see is people tying the idea of being against this, right, being akin to anti-Semitism. And there are very
Mm.
distinct concepts because there are many Jews that are actually anti-Zionist because they don't believe in the
Yeah.
idea that the Jewish people should have this land as their own. And they actually have uh, uh, concepts from the Talmudic scriptures to support this. They actually argue that it's actually very un-Jewish. So it's very well, set the right word. So it's un-Jewish essentially to want to make Israel your homeland, right? Now I'm not going to get into the religious aspects of this. I'm not going to debate that. But the issue I have is, and this is something that we're seeing, it's happening at such a rapid rate. I heard this during a debate with this is one of the conservative debates between DeSantis, Vivek, and Nikki. I think some other guy was there, some boring fat guy. I forget his name. But Nikki Haley made the point right. And this is where I was like, oh, she is full of shit. Because Vivek was very, very apprehensive about Nikki. He's been saying that Nikki Haley is a chicken hawk. You can't trust her. She's going to be like a Dick Cheney. He's just going to blow the crap out of all these countries. And I didn't have any facts to it. But when I hear how people use words and they try to make arguments, I become very weary when they do things that are very, very clever, but are very, very disingenuous. And one of the things that she tried to do very early on in the debates was make the argument that she wanted to make being anti-Semitic synonymous with being anti-Zionist, right? And this is what you do. You change the meaning. This is how you win wars. You change the meaning of words, right? This is what they did with the
Mm.
concept of being an anti-vaxxer a while back, right? Like to make it so that
Yeah.
you're essentially if you're against um, mandates, then you're an anti-vaxxer, right? Like if you're somehow against freedom, right? And I saw the same thing being proclaimed to like the argument that this should be done by the government. The first thing that Nikki Haley would do, one of the first things she'd do, is she'd make it so everyone was anti-Semitic if they were essentially anti-Israel, right? And anti wanting to make the Israeli people have this country as their own, which obviously the Palestinians are very much fighting against. And this is a very dangerous theme, a very dangerous precedent that I see being done a lot. A lot of times, what these clever politicians do is that they change the landscape by changing the definition of words, whether it's changing the definition of what safe and effective means, whether it's changing the definition of what it means to be anti-Zionist, or changing the definition of what it means to be a citizen, which I can simply see people doing now, saying you're not a British citizen because you're not in favor of conscription and going to fight for king and queen. No, well, actually, I actually spoke about the Magna Carta, how, in one of my videos about how actually it's a very British thing to be rebellious and not want to fucking serve the king if the king is being a tyrant, right? But I see
Mm.
this as being the heart of the problem. People don't honestly speak about what the issue is right now because the issue is not about being anti-Jew. The issue is about, because as I said, look, and I mean this, I'm a Jew supremacist, but I hate the idea of one, bombarding the shit out of people, and the idea of um, taking ownership of arguably a land that is not yours. Now, I granted this is a very nuanced situation, but just because I have dealt with certain facts that have led me to this conclusion doesn't mean that I am anti-Semitic. I'm racist, and it seems like people often want to use these words, whether it's racism, anti-Semitic, or whatever it might be, to simply just quell arguments. And I think arguments, if
Mm.
you're being honest, are a very effective way of gaining clarity. Sometimes we're not going to have agreement on things, but to me, the most important one of the reasons I love speaking about you is you understand what I'm saying sometimes better than I do. Like you have a very clear, because you're very honest in your use of words, and if I don't understand or agree with the word that you've used, we'll have clarity. But what I see in this political game is people trying to pull the wool over your eyes by obfuscating language. And then before you know it, you think that the most American thing to do is to fucking be a an anti or to be a Zionist, not realizing that being a Zionist actually deals with, like, if you have a look at the protocols of Zion, it may have a lot of things that you're not in favor of. And this goes into more detail about what the protocols are, what the goals are, and so forth, which is a very detailed conversation. But as a very basic understanding, my understanding of Zionism is, look, I believe that I have the right to have this land, Israel, as my own, as a Jewish person, that should be the land of the Jews. Now, correct me on that, and we can fight over the definition, but it's important, I think, that we have clarity.
Yes, I
Yeah,
mean it is definitely been a long game they've done is using words and using emotional impact to drive a point. I mean one of the clearest examples recently was with a lot of the coverage of Hamas and exaggeration or blaming things on Hamas that they weren't responsible for. Perhaps the best example was the story of them reportedly going in beheading babies, which of course was later confirmed to not have been the case.
well, you
But
say of course,
also,
but there's still a lot of people that are pulling back against that. And I'm just playing devil's
exactly.
advocate here. But what's the evidence in regards to that? Like whether it, because I
Well,
haven't looked at it deeply enough.
it was first reported by an anonymous Israeli army source, and then the Israeli army later came back and said officially that they didn't have any evidence of that. And then they managed to track down the person responsible for the claim, who also said that it was actually not the case. Similarly, there were stories in the very early days when the fighting broke out back in
Mm.
October. The BBC reported from a source who claimed about Hamas raping Israeli women, and that was reported by the BBC. The Wall Street Journal and Los Angeles Times then reported that, citing the BBC as its source. But the source that the BBC initially cited later turned out to be fraudulent. So what the BBC did was they then changed the article to cite the Wall Street Journal as its source. So the Wall Street Journal was guiding the BBC. The BBC was guiding the Wall Street Journal. It was only the LA Times that came out and said, "Oh, we've had to redact this. Turns out that this wasn't true." So kudos to them for at least making a revision. But that's how the flow of information today works. Say for example, when the hospital was bombed by Israel. Israel came out and used all these fancy graphics and sophisticated arguments on social media to claim that it was in fact Hamas bombing their own hospital. That's what the mainstream media in the West reported for about a week. And then when it turned out that it was indisputably Israel that destroyed that hospital, the media has very, very little coverage of it, and the public are just sort of expected to forget about it and move on. And the only memory they have is of Hamas destroying their own hospital. And it's a long game. They've done this with beheading babies. That precise example is what they did with the First World War with the Germans. They claimed that Germans were strolling into Belgium and beheading and bayoneting babies. And then, of course, there was the whole situation with the Gulf War when there was that false testimony about Saddam Hussein and his men rolling into Kuwaiti hospitals and taking out
Mhm.
all the babies from the incubators. Um, they're always making up these full stories involving
Sure.
babies, and they know exactly how to. It's either babies or it's some form of if you don't support this, you are bad for XYZ reasons, you're an anti-Semite, you're a racist. It's some kind of emotional manipulation. It's the easiest tactic for them to use.
Absolute, absolutely. They say the truth is the first casualty of war, and it is an
Mm.
information war. And obviously, the best way to because here's the thing. This is how I look at it. I think this is rationally understandable. In order for Israel is extremely powerful. I mean, they have nuclear weapons, and they often make, and I say this generally speaking, obviously, that they often make the argument that look, if we wanted to completely genocide a country, we could. We have nuclear weapons, but obviously we're choosing not to because we're considerate. We give them warning, a few days before we bombard the shit out of them, all that kind of stuff. Yes, I'm using in a very animated language here, but my point, right? My greater point is that uh what was the point I was making? Damn it, I went on a tangent as to why they don't do this shit. Damn, I hate when that happens. Um oh, it'll come to me later, but oh fuck, I hate it. I was going somewhere with this just in regards to how Israel has the power to do all this kind of, oh, that's right, how they use this. That's right. Okay, so they need to gain favor, international favor, that it's acceptable for them to do what they're doing. Because the reality is, if they didn't have support from the United States, if they didn't have support from the world, enough support, and granted, Israel does what the fuck it wants, right? But if the entire world viewed Israel, even though it does, I think, by large in part, look at them very negatively right now. South Africa is already saying that they're in violation of human rights and all this kind of stuff, and is wanting them to be,
Yes.
punished and so forth. But if Israel was not deemed to be behaving in an appropriate way, then there would be hell to pay. And obviously, no sound politician wants that. And so, the best way to safeguard against that is to drum up enough public support that this is an evil enemy. You make the enemy seem completely despicable. I mean, this is what you know
Mm.
what? I'm going to call you out for I'm playing around. But this is what the British were experts of, right? Divide and conquer.
Atrocity
You make out
propaganda.
absolutely you make out these people to be not even humans. I mean, this is what happened to the Australian indigenous people, right? They were actually considered to be part of the flora and fauna, right? So this allowed the Brits essentially to come in and treat them like fucking animals, right? This is what's been done time immemorial. You make these people out. The American Southern plantation owners did this with the Africans a few hundred years ago. They made them out to be three-fifths human. They're not really human, and therefore it's acceptable for us to do this to them. You make them out to be less than, or you bring about propaganda. These people are the most despicable people. They're beheading babies. And look, this is what Julius Caesar freaking did. He wrote about this. That one of the reasons there's this classic quote about how he's been so effective in bringing about war by essentially creating this. It's called the Hegelian dialectic, right? Problem, reaction, solution, as David Icke often uh, talks about. Ultimately, you claim there to be a massive problem, or you make a problem bigger than it actually is. Does that sound familiar? Right? Like the government hasn't done
Mm.
that before, and therefore it allows you to justify the most ridiculous things in order to address the problem. Things that most people wouldn't usually be happy with doing, like the conscription thing. Right? I would argue that the problem with this kind of goes back to the whole. I truly believe in Trump if Trump got in power. And look, I'm not like a. I mean, I think the guy's entertaining, right? But if he got in power, the fact that he was, the United States only got into one war, uh, or didn't start any new wars, from what I understand, when Trump was in power, and that hasn't happened in like 70 years, right? I think Trump would dismantle the whole situation within a short amount of time, right? I don't. I think this situation is probably not as serious, potentially, right? Um, but it's been made out to be a lot more serious in order to justify getting troops involved, in order to conscript people, in order to, because obviously, in order to allow something as insane as conscription, and I'm not saying we're there yet, this problem needs to be made out to be even worse than it actually is. Now, this is me conspiracizing over here. I actually do believe that the situation with Russia is a very serious situation because anytime you have superpowers involved or a superpower involved, things can get very dangerous. But what we are seeing with Israel, and I don't want to beat this down the bush, I think it's clear. You make something out to be a lot worse than it is. And I personally, based on the information I've been exposed to, and with the video footage I've seen of how Hamas deals with their uh people that kidnap hostages, all that kind of stuff. I mean, they seem to be like any military organization. You can arguably call the United States a terrorist organization, which Yemen, from what I understand, have openly, and I think that's completely fair. I think the United States is a big as terrorist as Hamas is. Not to say that what Hamas did was not absolutely atrocious, but if we're putting things into comparison over here, one side is using sophisticated military weaponry, right? That is just as destructive, if not more so. And the other side is using the technology that they have able to use. And you're calling them terrorists, but quite arguably, you're just as bad as they are. I'm speaking about the United States in comparison to Hamas. Yeah. By the way,
Yeah,
feel free to
absolutely.
interject anytime I'm going on a rant, man. Don't wait for me to talk because it's. I feel like you do that, man. But no,
No,
yeah,
absolutely no. With America and its terrorist policies, it's you look at Pakistan, you look at Syria, you look at Iran, all these indiscriminate bombings and drone attacks that they carry out often kill many innocent people, many innocent children and whatnot. It's all about how you define terrorism, and the sort of general dictionary definition of terrorism is the use or threat of violence in pursuit of political aims. So, but every single day we almost come into contact with a degree of terrorism. I'm not
absolutely.
gonna say that the police just existing and using force is a form of terrorism, but when they implement policies or enforce policies that haven't been decided by democratic mandate, haven't been like that would not be approved by the majority of the public, and are instituted for political purposes, then that's literally the use or threat of force for political purpose. And conscription would be is yet another example. This isn't a war of self-defense or a war for our own existence. It's Britain's own policies and Western aggression that have contributed to the state of affairs as they are now, that makes some kind of conflict more possible. That's not a case of defense. It's a case of politics, geopolitical aims. And if they're going to force people to fight for them for their political cause, that, my friend, makes the British government a terrorist entity. And I believe it's unlawful to give financial support to a terrorist entity. So hopefully that means we can stop paying our taxes pretty soon.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, And like I actually look largely in part, I agree with you, but the idea of implementing this is something I think about a lot, right? The idea of supporting obviously, I'm libertarian, taxation, theft, all that kind of shit, but the idea of you could make the argument that any organization is behaving in terrorist activities. For instance, we all have friends. I'd like to think it's obviously difficult in this day and age because there's so many momos out there, but we obviously have people that we like, we have a lot in common with, you know. I, but there are sometimes shit that people do that you're not in favor of, right? Now, the idea of supporting them, whether it's through financial means or through other ways, does that mean you condone everything that this person does? And if we extend this to an organization, like a lot of people actually love their country, justifiably so, because their country, large in part, the government of that country is behaving in very beneficent ways, like they're providing, very uh, beneficent treatment to injured people and so forth. And some countries don't even do it through taxation. From what I understand, largely in part like Dubai, right? But there's certain things they do, like I don't know, the military, one branch of it, dropping bombs on people that you're in line with, right? Now it becomes tricky when you say, well, because you supported this country, therefore you were complicit in every single thing that that country does. Like saying that, oh,
Mm.
because you like this person, then therefore you support every single thing this person does. And I'm actually going to extend this because this is actually somewhat tangential but very relevant to the whole situation with the Epstein client list, right? Because there are a lot of good people
Mm.
on that list, right? Actually, when I say good people, I mean many people that actually went to that island, right? Now, let's say that they were engaged in doing things that are considered, morally heinous, that kind of shit, right? Now, one of the things that Elon Musk said that I actually have a lot of respect for because he was so honest about it. He had this fucking Aquarian energy. It's kind of like, I don't fucking give a shit. This is who I am. And I've seen him have a lot of moments like that. Was when he openly spoke about this is probably a year ago before the Epstein list was even like more public, right? He made the point that, look, in regards to Epstein, I actually don't know much about him. I know a lot of the shady stuff, but he said, yeah, I actually knew Epstein, and just despite all the things which I obviously don't condone, he actually had positive things to say about him. The fact that this individual was funny. Like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was open enough to say that there were certain things about that person that he actually liked, rather than playing this game that a lot of people play that because of this horrible thing that this person did, there are no redeemable qualities about this guy whatsoever. He actually made the point that I actually miss him. There are times when, he was actually a good person at times to hang out with, right? But it's this thing that people do where they chump. They say, well, because this organization, this person is engaged in this activity, there are no redeemable qualities. And I say this because in relation to supporting some organization financially, right? It's like what we can't support someone or an entity because, and it's very different, I think, if you're doing something knowingly that they're going to use what you have given them in order to commit horrible things, right? But I think we have to delineate between just giving money to an organization or supporting someone as an individual and separate every single thing that they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's almost a case of separating like the art from the artist or something. Um,
Yes, that
uh,
is a beautiful point. That's the
I,
point I'm
I
trying to get
almost
to.
feel like
Yeah.
it almost it sort of brings me back to like something that Kanye West said, which was sort of a good point, and then he
Oh, I
completely
know where you're gonna go. Yeah. All
muddied it
right,
up a
go.
bit when
Hitler,
he was when
Hitler.
he was
Yeah.
saying about how yeah that there's good about everybody, and that is true. And to be fair, even using that particular example, yeah, that he did do some good things for his people in terms of public work policies and infrastructure and other things like that. That you can find little elements from his policies that were positive or could be implemented today for
Yeah.
good effect
I
potentially.
researched that shit actually, and it's to me it's kind of it's like you're in power. It's kind of like Joe Biden saying, "Hey, look, make the country a better place," and someone goes and implements all these policies, like I don't know, creating highways and all that kind of shit. Like as to whether that was his idea specifically, I don't know if it is, and I'm not sure if I want to give him credit for it. But I do understand the point you're trying to make, large in
True.
part.
It's just simply a case of everything has become so commodified, and it's through our consumption of media that there are the heroes and there are the villains, and it's become so much worse today with instant content. You can scroll YouTube Shorts and TikTok and Instagram and everything and get anything you want immediately. Go to Tinder and you swipe, swipe, swipe. I've stopped messaging this person. There's another person right here. You can just throw someone away for one thing or another
Yeah.
rather than connecting to this. And we can all create these images in our head of crazy Batman like supervillains, but we're all human beings at the end of the day. And yes, there are some genuine one-dimensional sociopaths out there, but
Absolutely. I'm
they're
glad you made that
exceptionally
point.
rare.
Yeah.
The, the,
Yeah.
the, the majority of people are human and can make mistakes and do bad things, and still have positives about them, and some people can redeem themselves and change from a negative past. There's so many people who've turned their lives around and been through monumental changes across their lives. I mean, I do think there is an extent with the Epstein list where there's a lot of very, very powerful people where potentially many of the people who are able to rise up the corporate ladder in their respective industries are able to do so because they fit in with that corporate culture, and they have the same delineations, whatever it is, as the other people. However, there's also an extent to which people, for their own self-interest, want to rise up and want to get more powerful, and they do that by rubbing shoulders with the right people, It doesn't make it morally right whatsoever to indulge in those things, but it's different. Someone who's making foolish decisions for career advantages and whatnot, as opposed to complete blood-sucking vampires who are going around and doing unspeakable evils. Jeffrey Epstein did, according to all testimonies, do unspeakable evils, and he was one very, very sick puppy. But of course, if he had money and because he did sort of grow himself massively across his lifetime and was very wise with money and with investment, and if I wanted to handle hire someone to handle a large investment portfolio for me, and he was still alive, Jeffrey Epstein wouldn't be a bad bet. I wouldn't want to give him any money or give him any
Yeah.
business and support him in any way because he does terrible things with it. But it means that it is still a positive, and I feel like society is so quick to rush to these sort of black and white,
Well said.
very overly simplified explanations.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate the nuance there because this is the kind of person I am. Like I don't like generalizations. I think it's intellectually lazy, and I like going into the nuance of all of this kind of stuff. And I'm so glad that you made the point. You made the separation between uh, the fact that some of these people may be doing certain things that are good, certain things that are bad. Like what degree? Maybe you just wanted to be in touch with this person for business connections. One of the people I heard speak about his contact, his relationship with Epstein was Bobby Kennedy. Now this is a man, and when I find someone that I find interesting, I immerse myself in their work to the point where it's insanity, you know. Um, I find him to be the most honest politician that I have listened to. I will say that definitively. There are issues that I do not agree with him on, like his position on Israel. That being said, I've learned a lot from him in regards to when it comes to just looking at facts, epistemology, like looking at evidence in regards to what's going on. I think he's right on the money, but we have different values when it comes to certain things and so forth. He's like I don't buy into the whole idea that you have a right to defend yourself and you call self-defense dropping bombs in a country, because you're trying to take out terrorists. But the point I wanted to make in regards to Bobby Kennedy, even before the list came out, he spoke very openly and honestly in a way that I really respect, that you don't see a lot of politicians speak about in regards to how he had people like, I think it was Epstein in his house, like he knew these people and so forth and spoke. And the fact is, when someone says something that is going to be potentially very damaging and they say that very openly in a way where they don't have anything to hide, I have a lot of respect for that because most politicians don't behave like that. They look at things not paratelically, like not acting in the moment, right? Independent of what's going to happen. They're always playing chess. What's going to happen to me if I say this? People won't like me. But the fact that he
Mm.
so openly spoke about why he did that, how he has a lot of powerful people in his home, like he didn't agree with a lot of the shit that he did, necessarily, like he knew it, but he just respected this, and like I think, yeah, that's right. He actually did go to the island, right? Now, Bobby Kennedy, knowing what I know about this guy, I am sure he didn't partake in anything nefarious. But the idea that simply just because you went to the island, right, meant that you must have been engaged in some nefarious shit, I don't think it necessarily coincides. And the other thing, which is very taboo that a lot of people don't want to talk about, right, is that bearing in mind, I don't understand all the details in regards to this. All I do know is that Epstein had an island. A lot of famous people would go to that island and they would partake in interacting with a lot of underage women here. And now we say, I actually don't know how old they are. It's also worth considering, based on the fact that I don't know, that the age of consent may have been under 18, but may have been still at an age that is legal in many countries. Bearing in mind that when we're speaking about the age of consent here, it's not a definitive. So, granted, a lot of Americans, they consider what happened. It's like with Russell Brand, right? Like the whole situation with him. It's like, oh, Russell Brand's dealing with someone that is an underage. You're like, within the UK, there was nothing illegal about what he did. Girl still fits in the age of consent category. Most people deem that to be very kind of shady behavior. They feel as if it's sketchy, but I am not going to paint with a broad brush and say that just because you went to an island and you did some, and you may have interacted with people that are doing things that are questionable, right? Not even illegal, means that you are a bad person, complicit. The devil's always in the details of this thing, but I think most people, they just paint with a broad brush and said, oh, you were on that island. Oh, now I could never vote for you. And I say this in regards to Bobby because whereas I don't actually agree with some of his policies, I do feel as if he has more integrity than any politician I've seen in a very long time. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people want to overlook. They do this either consciously or unconsciously because they hate this person, like Trump. I only started liking Trump when I started hearing all the leftists, right, speak about him in such a ridiculous negative way that I was going, well, that seems a bit fishy. Because I was brought up listening to people like Dan Carlin, right? And he's someone that I deeply respect. But he had this view towards Trump where he's like, okay, this guy is completely, can't trust him. Then I started listening to what he was saying, and I had issues with it. But then I started listening to what people were saying about him, and I was like, oh, well, no, that's just not true. Like, what's going on right now with Trump, right? The reason as to why I think he won so massively in the Iowa caucus was every time the opposition would do something that was just clearly outrageously politically motivated, right? Like wanting to imprison this guy, take this guy to court because he was somehow sketchy with his real estate holdings. Now, I'm not a master of my understanding of this stuff, but from what I understand, this is coming from actual experts. What he did is what pretty much everyone in the industry of real estate does. It's like just like you value your property in a way that is very favorable, right? But he's been called up on this,
Mm.
and they're using this as a way of preventing him from running for 2024 POTUS. And the other thing, which is absolutely astonishing, Vivek absolutely dismantled this argument, is this idea that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist when he is verbatim said, look, go out and protest peacefully, right? And then you're going to use that against him. This is something I actually have a lot of issue with, the whole idea of inciting violence. When now, granted, look, he's openly said that like he doesn't agree with the verdict in regards to the election, all that kind of stuff. That's another discussion. I'm inclined to think that, like with most elections, there's a lot of bullshit. But the idea of saying that he was inciting insurrection when he has verbatim said, go out and protest peacefully, it's like I tell you, hey man, I don't like what this government is doing, what the UK government is doing. They're fucking crazy. You need to stand up against that. And you decide to go and do something in your own right that's basically kind of crazy. Like you fucking take arms and you take out the entire British establishment, right? Now, I didn't tell you to do that per se, but the idea that people are going to say that I've incited the violence that you've done when I've spoken in very generic terms. And what Donald Trump did was actually even clearer. It told you to do this peacefully, right? Like the idea of making someone responsible for everything that you've done, I think is crazy. And this is what people are doing, I think, because they're politically motivated with this issue. Because I've heard some people speak about Trump in a way where it's kind of like, this is the rise of Hitler. If we have this guy take power, it is going to be the end of the world. And therefore they will use, now I could say that about Hitler, right? Like back a few decades ago. However, if Hitler was accused of doing something that he didn't do, I would be the first person that would be arguing, well, he's innocent of this crime. But a lot of people can't do that. As soon as they don't like someone, out with all the evidence, out with objectivity, out with making observations. Everyone just makes heinous evaluations that are biased because they don't care about the truth. Do you see the situation? How do you see the
Yeah,
situation? Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely, it's preconceptions that people form, and when you do that, and it's something that we all do from time to time on a subtle level,
Mm,
base predictions or see trends or something else,
sure.
but it's a case of being beholden to these sort of prejudices or allowing our sort of minds to open up and sort of confirm whether they're true or readapt them if they're not true. And
Absolutely.
it's just simply a case where people see all this celebrities. They hear a bad thing about someone, and then they want to rush to blame everything else at them. So Trump institutes a policy that someone disagrees with. Therefore, his fans have gone out and been and done this stuff in the Capitol building. Therefore, Trump's responsible, and it's people rushing to find any opportunity. He did this bad thing, therefore he also did this other bad thing as well. And because people already dislike him, they're not going to think about it more rationally or give him the benefit of the doubt. But it's ironic, these charges coming from especially with a lot of the American liberal media outlets who were complaining about it. In so much as during the riots that took place following the death of George Floyd, there some of the media outlets were actually coming out and encouraging people to riot and to engage in violent protest. And yet these
Mm,
same outlets are out there parroting the Biden regime over all these allegations against Trump. Um, and Trump,
Double
as you
standards.
say, he's the first president in so long to not introduce any new wars. But he's also facing more charges than any president in history. And I'm also not the biggest fan of Trump overall, and especially where it comes to some of these foreign policies. In that, although he didn't start any new wars, he can be quite aggressive. There was the assassination of that Iranian general.
Well said. I'm glad you brought that up.
And there was also, of course, with the Kushner peace plan between Palestine and Israel, which was basically America will give the Palestinians some money if they leave their land and give it to Israel, basically. But at the end of the day, he didn't, roll in and start any kind of new American-Israeli inquisition or anything. And
Absolutely.
compared to other politicians, he's the probably the best president America has had in a good couple decades.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The only reason as to in terms of as to why I personally like politicians and so forth is for one of three reasons. Either because they're super entertaining. Like one of the reasons why a part of me, the very sadistic part of me, wants Trump elected, right, was because it was going to piss so many people off. Because I thought if this
Yeah.
happens, it's like getting popcorn. Oh my God, imagine if this happens. Oh my, it is so fascinating, right? Like once I was like, yeah. But then I'm like, oh, you're fucking, you watch people losing their mind. Like if this happens, imagine if it happens. Like there's a part of you that's like, oh, I kind of hope this happens, you know. But the
It's going to
other
be even
is
more glorious this year.
yeah, there is a bit of that with RFK, but it's more like I actually like I've learned a lot in terms of my political understanding, like my political IQ, which only started maybe 10 years ago. Like I had a very found understanding philosophically, right? But in terms of understanding politics and what goes on and so forth, I didn't. And like when politicians say what they're going to do, I would just take them at their face value. But you kind of have to look at their history, what they're about, and so forth. With Bob Kennedy Jr., rather than just listening to him talk the talk, I've actually done my research about him. I understand his family, I understand his history, the kind of things that he stood for, and he's the kind of person that time and time again goes against the narrative, says things that are very unpleasant that people don't want to hear. When someone takes on that stance, it it immediately removes them from being a politician in my eyes because they're not politicking. They're not they're not doing politics. They're not trying to say things that are going to win them the most amount of favor, trying to figure out what they can say to get the demographics that they need in order to win. They're saying things because they believe it to be true. That is something that only the most strong individuals that are truly moved by something greater than themselves do. This is what you say when you say someone is a is a revolutionist. They don't care about the current paradigm. They're willing to stand for something, even though it's never been done before. And I have a lot of respect for people like that. And I see that because of Bob Kennedy wanting to, like the fact that he was so openly against speaking about what was going on with, right, magic potions and whatnot. Part of me was like, oh, imagine if this guy gets in power, because that's gonna like blow the lid on everything. That being said, he has said that, look, he's not going to bring that up unless, of course, he's asked about it. He's not made it like his number one thing in his campaigns. But in terms of him speaking so openly, and this is the other thing, in terms of his understanding of politics, about what's been going on over the last 50, 60 years, from the JFK assassination to, pharmaceutical companies, all of that kind of shit, he is not someone that only has an understanding of what goes on, but he has won so many court cases. Like he fully understands how to win these cases with facts. You listen to him drop the truth in regards to what's going on, and it's very convincing because he speaks in a way that is very definitive. He doesn't make, biased evaluations about this. He's very trepidatious about saying things that he cannot prove definitively. For someone like me that actually admires critical thinking, I respect that massively. I think a lot of people like politicians because they're so inspiring. They can speak with fluffy language, and he's good at that too. But when someone has substance to support what they're saying, you got to respect that. Because I think first and foremost, people look at someone that they believe can lead. They are inspiring. This is why a lot of they can unite people. I think a lot of people don't like Trump because they consider him divisive, right? but then there also
Mm.
needs to be substance towards that person. Like I heard a while ago that the two characteristics that people, women, everyone finds most attractive in someone is one, their sincerity, and then their capability. Like the ability that you have to actually, speak with integrity, sincerity is paramount, but it doesn't mean anything unless of course, you're someone of substance. Trump obviously can walk the walk. He's very successful. He's a billionaire and so forth, but doesn't always come across as the most sincere person. Bob Kennedy, in my opinion, he always does. I don't agree with a lot of the things, but I know what I disagree with him on, and he stuck to it from day one. And he changes when he comes about enough evidence. And in regards to being convincing, when you actually get past his voice, because let's face it, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing voice, and he doesn't like listening to himself. But I've gotten to the point where I resonate with the underlying message of what he's saying so much that I consider him to be a compelling public speaker. I don't get swayed by the fact that he has this voice. And because I've been listening to him for a
Mm.
long time, either because I don't notice it or I think it's actually improved. It doesn't annoy me that much anymore. And I even overlook it. It doesn't, over the last year, I've realized that it's actually not even a thing. So he is one of the most compelling speakers if you listen to the content of what he is disseminating. And if you look at his track record, his history, and he truly is the closest thing the United States has to royalty. Because let's face it, the most
Mm.
the most loved person in United States history in the generation of our time and our fathers was Kennedy. I no one really cares about his womanizing. The fact of the matter is he was a man of integrity when
Mm.
it came to the shit that matters. I can overlook all that trivial shit. The guy was someone that was very much a champion of freedom, real democratic principles at the time, right? And was someone that would stand for the truth and doing the right thing regardless of what he wanted. That's something that we don't see by many of the politicians in this day and age.
Absolutely, and there's a reason why he ended up getting bumped off by the CIA. Robert F. Kennedy is an absolute rare gem. Like it's very rare to see people in politics of his caliber and it is partly because of the influence that his family's been able to acquire that he's able to sort of step forward and garner the platform that he has. But he's staying true, he's staying sincere, and he's not selling out. And it's there's nothing you can do but respect that. In the UK, I can't think of any politician that we have over here in any party or alternative party or alternative media personality who even remotely comes to Bobby Kennedy's level of
I agree.
sincerity and integrity. And that we've seen in the UK, of course, the mainstream parties are completely controlled, and nothing good is ever going to come out of a candidate from any of those. They lack the freedom and autonomy to do so. But there's sort of various media personalities who've come forward and claim to create their own political parties and whatnot. And without giving any names, a lot of these people come across as incredibly insincere. Like it seems quite clear that these people are to some extent grifting, or they don't understand what they're talking about. They make sweeping generalizations, and then when they get into debates with people, they end up looking like a complete fool. Whereas Kennedy is one of those people who, as you say, not only has the ideas and the principles, but has the substance behind them, which is something that's incredibly rare. These days, politicians learn the lingo of yapping their way into whatever they want the public to believe, by just saying, all the politician newspeak rather than actually making points and actually providing any kind of evidence. And when you've got all the powers of PR and the various national media companies in your hands, then any kind of public faux pas you make, providing it's not too extreme and you haven't been chosen by the party to be the next sacrificial lamb, then you can get away with basically anything. And any small individual who wants to make a change, if they come forward, then the powers that be can crush them over any minor slip up. So the standards are definitely very different. And it's surprising that there hasn't been some kind of scandal involving Kennedy, because if there was any amount of dirt on him that existed whatsoever, then that would have all been made public by now.
Oh,
So it's how
100.
you know the guy is clean.
Yeah. Well, the worst thing they've been doing is the whole like they have been that believe me, they've gone through massive efforts to make him out to be a racist, which is ridiculous. I'm actually
Mm.
more of a racist than that guy is. I'll openly say it. I mean, he was someone that his family and him like they were very much in support of the anti-discrimination, the Civil Rights Act, all that kind of stuff. Like they've done amazing things. Like I heard about some of the stuff that his family did, by donating a lot of money, crazy things to uh, these impoverished parts of the United States, black suburbs, all that kind of stuff. Like they're incredible with that kind of stuff. Um, the other figure though, I think is really commendable, just pure based off of sheer articulation, perspicacity, ability to break down shit. Has got to be Vivek. What do you think about? Have you been following much about the Vivek rise? Like I hadn't heard about this guy up till maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago, and during the I mean, granted he stepped down, but during the whole uh campaigning. Like he was probably the standout figure in the media, at least on my feeds, because he had these incredible rants, just breaking down everything that was going on. Someone that wasn't afraid to speak the truth. It's kind of like a 21st century, well, yeah, like a 21st century version of well, actually no. Ron Paul was obviously a 21st century guy as well, but like a more modern version of Ron Paul, I was going to say, because he was someone that was really ruffling the feathers. He went crazy against Nikki Haley. Like he was so
Mm.
anti-establishment when he started. It was like, are you serious, bro? Like he was just going out just saying shit that look, and you realize how it works. It's always the people that don't have people that are not beholden to other people. Like Vivek is one of the few people that actually paid his own way because he's a very successful billionaire that has made a lot of money, and he's very open and honest about how he made his money. Granted, from what I understand, it's in biotech. Like I haven't looked too much into that, but based off of the things that I do know about this guy, I got to have a lot of respect for him. And I say this because I think anytime someone, when you hear, this is me personally, hear biotech, you think, oh, this guy's like some kind of like nefarious organization, pharmaceutical organization is probably just doing things for the bottom line. But when you actually listen to him speak about the kind of stuff that he created, like for instance, he's created innovations that are massively helping children and first and foremost, I'm not against any of these technologies, whether they're biological or technologically speaking and so forth, provided you don't try to pull the wool over people's eyes. You're honest about
Mm.
obviously the safety of these technologies and so forth. And he is someone just based off of his willingness to stand against the key establishment is someone that I got to give props to. And I've never in my entire life heard someone break down things so eloquently with such a decisive, uh, unbelievable eloquence. I've never I have like I have so many of his rants bookmarked because they're so brilliantly delivered. This guy has a photographic memory. This guy is unbelievably articulate. He's the kind of person that could just study any topic he was not familiar with, know more about it than you within the space of a week, and just disarm you in argumentation. And he's also very honest about the shit that he does not know. And I find myself even on issues that I generally disagree with him on, when he argues for it, I everything that he speaks, I tend to agree with because he says things that are very definitive in regards to it and leaves all the things that I wouldn't agree with him. He leaves it out of the conversation. Like he's very decisive. Like he is the consummate speaker. And I don't think someone like that gets into politics because that's not what politics is about. You can't be that fucking brilliant and articulate and honest. Because I think eventually you'll end up being taken out. I mean, this is what I believe will happen to, and I don't want to go into that in that realm. This is one of the reasons why I think they didn't give a security detail to Bobby Kennedy, even though more than anyone, even though he's had a death, like he actually had someone try to kill him, during the campaign more recently. This is
Mm.
why they haven't. And also, I think even though I think Trump is maybe like 10% establishment, whereas someone like Nikki Haley is like 95% establishment. I still believe that there are a lot of people, I'm sure, that want to take out Trump, right? That don't want him to come in power because he is very much his own person. I say the same about Elon Musk. What's your feeling about some of these people, man?
Trump does he seems to be his own person to an extent, but he will operate within the scope of what's acceptable, and
Yeah,
it's a compromise to reach power. So whether that's geopolitical things like Israel and the Russia-Ukraine situation.
mm,
Likewise with Elon Musk, is Elon Musk is his own person. He is fearless, he's outspoken, but at the same time, he does a degree of damage control, or has a degree of sort of PR. For example, recently with visiting Auschwitz with Ben Shapiro, to sort of counteract any claims of him being an anti-Semite for
yeah, yeah,
anything he said about Israel.
sure,
But
sure.
having to be seen alongside Ben Shapiro in Auschwitz in order to not be seen as anti-Semitic is sort of quite a sort of extreme extent that
Okay,
doesn't really sort of line up with sort of the overall advocacy for, you know, freedom and justice and these values that he often campaigns for.
let me pull back on that a little because I think that's a fair evaluation, but it requires us to understand why he's done that. And I'm not going to make any claims as to why. I don't understand. All I know is that he has done that publicly because he does actually, he's openly, to my knowledge, said that he actually does. Obviously, he feels horrible for the plight of um, any injustice, any people who suffered and so forth. But I guess the idea of him being seen with these figures doesn't necessarily, in my mind, indicate that he is just giving into the establishment, so to speak. Like just being seen with someone like that, I don't think warrants you giving up your principles. I think a lot of the times, I mean, granted, look, no denying it's good PR, but that doesn't seem to me to be like a sellout move. A sellout move would be him like let's say I don't know. I can think of far better examples, like uh, like just pulling out of Twitter because he realizes that that's not financially viable at all. Like during the early stages,
Mm.
when he was initially saying that he wanted to do this because he wanted to create like a more of a free speech platform, which is how I understood things. But um, here I don't know if I would say that he is someone that is kind of selling out in that sense because I get the fact that there are a lot of people, right? And the freedom movement isn't some kind of like you know uh unified field. There are all these people that have very, very different
Mm.
views, obviously, and there are a lot of people that are very much against Elon Musk. They consider him to be a plant. They consider him to be just, because he's caught up in all this technology. They think he's part of the transhuman movement. And they also see what he's doing with Skylink to be very nefarious because they think that this technology is very, very devastating. But people like to make a lot of evaluations as opposed to observations about this kind of stuff. And I always try to delineate between these two things. I don't know. In fact, I'm inclined to believe that Elon Musk, as he says, as all evidence points to, he set that up Skylink because it's profitable, it's beneficial. A lot of people think that that technology is going to be very, very harmful, right? This is the conspiracy in regards to it. I don't know enough about the technology, but I'm inclined to think if you're using, any kind of like sophisticated technology like that to transmit information, there's probably going to be some side effects. If it's anything like 4G, I don't know. But because of that, they think that because he's somehow behind all of that, that he must be involved in some nefarious plot to to injure all these people, right? And they've also gone as far as to say because
Mm.
of Neuralink, that obviously is a technology that can be somehow in the future used to control people, right? Like I'm sure your mind can run up with
Mm.
the potential for that to be used to control minds and so forth, which quite frankly is amazing technology that can be used to help people that cannot walk to do amazing things. Now, because of the
Mm.
mindset that I have where I don't like to make pseudo profundities, and I also respect individual freedom, as long as he doesn't try to force that shit onto people, right? And I say shit, I actually think it's a great technology. I don't have a problem with the technology, but a lot of people, because they're coming from this as from the perspective that these technologies that he's implementing, the things that he's doing can be used against us. This is the stick that David Icke has with him because he's been going hard on Elon Musk for a long time. And I actually don't share his view. Like he thinks that he is like what do they say? Like he's a Trojan horse, and you should be
Mm.
very weary of him. We should be weary of everyone, but based off of what he's done
Yes.
so far, because I got into this with a podcast I did with you. I think one of your commenters was having a go at me because I wasn't condemning Elon Musk and didn't think that he was part. And like I realized, you were weary of him, understandably. Um, if I had to base what he's actually done so far without making pseudo profanities, most of it, not blatantly agree with the shit that he's done that's fucked up, right? Then I can name a lot of them, but I don't see the things that he's done so far, particularly calling out the head of Disney, going ahead and
Mm.
creating the only free speech platform that's out there right now that allows people to truly share what's going on, going out and
Yes.
essentially advocate for things to uplift humanity and take us to a new planet. I think that's all consistent with who he has claimed to be and is not really far from what I fundamentally believe in, which is trying to bring about more personal sovereignty and more prosperity for mankind.
Yes, I mean, generally speaking, and especially in recent years, he has been, from how he appears publicly, to be a very positive influence. Twitter, I think, is the best example. It's not entirely free speech, but he's made a much better. The website is much better now than it was before Elon Musk took over. In terms of moderation policies. I mean, I actually completely agree with your opinion on Elon Musk right now. I agree with that idea of being cautious. So you don't
Oh, and
know
he
if
let
he's
Alex Jones
genuine.
back. Oh, bro, you can't,
That's
bro.
true.
Yeah, I
That's
gotta
true as
mention
well.
that is
That's
that's
true. He did
huge.
that
Oh,
whole live
that was
hangout with
beautiful.
Alex Jones as
Did you watch
well.
that? Did you listen to that?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Alex
that was
Andrew Tate
beautiful.
popped in as well.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. Because he was
crazy.
like, because look, he did not mask the fact that he was massively pissed off about what Alex Jones was claiming to do, right? And I actually called him out on
Yeah.
that shit as well, because this is classic Alex Jones. Like he goes on this rant, oh, massive conspiracy, this must be all. But look, he acknowledged the fact that look, he got that shit wrong, and he's very apologetic. And Elon Musk, once they got past that, like he saw a lot of common ground with Alex Jones, and the fact that he allowed him back on the platform, right? Because there was a point where people were saying, fuck, fuck Elon Musk. He won't allow Alex Jones. He won't allow all these other figures back on the platform. Anyway, sorry to cut you off there, but I just had to mention that. He
No,
did let him
he
back
did
on.
that is completely true, and that was it does show his commitment to free speech and everything. Um, I mean, he did ban Kanye. That was, I guess, a more
Yeah,
controversial issue,
bro, I
and
would have banned Kanye. It had not, look, here's the thing. It had nothing to do with what he posted. Let's be honest about this. Let me ask this to you honestly. First of all, it's his fucking platform, right? If someone was publicly denouncing you, right, like trying to make you look bad, right, like posting pictures about you looking like shit, well, it's just annoying the shit out of you, right? Like there's got to be a part of you, right? Now, granted, you want to be consistent. You got to think about how this affects society and all that kind of stuff. But if I was maintaining the utmost form of integrity, I'd be like, this guy pisses me off. He annoys the shit out of me. He's fucking saying shitty things about me. Get the fuck off my platform, right? I think it was clearly a situation like that. Granted, he said, "Oh, look, this guy's obviously, like I told you, warned you, can't be, hates." I can't remember the bullshit claim he made up, but it was clearly a reaction to the fact that this guy had openly been saying some shitty things about him. And it's like, at
hmm,
what? And look, publicly, look, you got to give this guy a bit of slack, Elon Musk. I'm not going to go out and say, look, I'm taking you off because you were pissing me off. You shared some pictures about me that made me look really bad. You're making me look like a dickhead. I'm taking you off. No, it's got to be like, well, you shared some images that were clearly anti-Semitic, and look, man, I don't allow that
true.
shit on my platform. You need some kind of backdoor. Like that's my
True.
take on it. That's
And
my
to
take.
be fair, at that point in time, Kanye probably shouldn't have been posting on any social media at all. The
No,
dude was clearly having a mental breakdown.
yeah,
So
absolutely. The whole Hitler thing, like I look, I there is if I was gonna be nuanced, yeah, fair enough. But he really lost the plot. I don't I actually am gonna call him like I don't consider him to be this amazing, innovative mind that a lot of people in terms of like politics and philosophy that a lot of people call him out to be. I think he's a creative genius in the realm of hip hop, but when I think trying to make the migration into the world of politics and saying the shit that he says as if it's some kind of like profound revelation, the Jews control the entertainment industry, all this kind of stuff, and saying these outlandish things. Yeah, a lot of them are true, but a lot of them are just very unnuanced and kind of just annoying, silly rhetoric, where you're trying to make out an entire group of people that just as heinous as what the other side does, like I don't fall for any of that rhetoric where you try to claim all these people are fucking fucked up. And he does that a
I mean,
lot.
he found
Yeah.
his niche. He found a niche amongst all the Trump supporters, and visiting the White House and all that. And he was receiving a degree of encouragement in that direction. And he was clearly going through a lot in his personal life, his relationship with Kim, and all that stuff. And he was losing his mind, and he has a history of difficulties in that department. And it just seemed like everything must have come to a head with all the
Oh,
newfound, Trump
100%.
supporters, which leads on to more conspiracies and
He
things, and he just went down a rabbit hole without the right, break
objectively,
set in mind.
observationally, he was hit with massive lawsuits. After he went out and on the Alex Jones podcast, like they actually hit him with, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was now granted the people behind it he claimed to be, Jewish and whatnot, but basically he was hit with these what you call slapstick lawsuits in order to take him down, which is what people typically do when you say something that they don't like. They hit you with legally justifiable things, but are not really in the letter of the spirit of the law, just because they're trying to take you down. And because he received so much of that, he just I'm not sure if this was after he went on Alex Jones, but this is in reaction to some of the shit that he said, it made him go even harder. And then there was at some point where he lost like a lot, he lost his $1 billion status, right? This is where, what company was it?
It
Adidas.
was
Uh,
the Yeezys
yeah,
deal,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely
with
pulled out.
Adidas.
It was so fascinating because he openly said that, Adidas, they can't cancel me, It's like it was like a
Mm.
call out. And it was beautiful because he didn't realize these people don't care about the fucking legal aspect. They don't care about eating multi-millions of dollars in order to fucking take you out. The bottom line is these people are human. It's not a Jewish thing. It's not a whatever it is thing. If you're saying something really shitty about someone, regardless of what contracts they have in place, they're willing to eat the contracts, because basically he had some kind of contractual um thing in place, right, in regards to how they couldn't uh you know cancel this deal. But from what I understand, Adidas, the people behind this, they just ignored that shit and they decided to pull him out anyway, and that's what happens when you say shitty things to people that that have a lot of power. And
Yeah,
they're
if it was a better financial decision to just like breach the contract and end it early and pay up on that end, then it would have been to continue carrying Kanye around and the associations with all the negative press. But it's also a case where Kanye is saying all these outrageous things, and then suddenly he's getting all these cancellations, and in his at the time sort of very deluded mindset, it's almost like, oh, I must be saying the right things because I'm being cancelled for them. These are the untouchable people in society, and then it puts him further and further into that mindset, almost like a slightly warped version of what we were saying earlier about Hamas or gang
yeah.
members or how your perception is shaped by what happens around you, and his perception at that point in time with whatever was going on in his life would have led him to sort of be more and more radicalized
That's
further down that line.
That's a salient point, but there are two ways to look at it, and they're both valid because the reality is that when you do speak about things and say things that people don't want to hear, right? They say the best way to find out who's in power is to speak truth to power, and this is when people come after you, right? And this because I would say objectively, I'm trying to be as honest as I can and disconnected from my own assumptions and bias, right? That without a doubt, what we saw over the last few years, people speaking out in regards to certain things, obviously we saw a reaction. People would be canceled. People would be shut down. Now, as to the reason as to why they were shut down, because as an observation, that definitely happened. The more you spoke about and said things that the status quo did not believe, you were shut down. The rationale, the evaluation is why that happened. One side argues that you were spreading disinformation, that you were saying things that were dangerous, and the other side argues that you were saying things that were true, that were going to alarm the world in regards to what was going on and so forth and create problems, right? And you were saying things that essentially people didn't want to be heard, right? And at I the reality is that there is there is truth to both of those things potentially. I mean, obviously one side is claiming that one that something that's being said is not true. Now there is an objective answer as to whether it's true or not. But I think in Kanye's situation, it's a case where he's saying something that there is a lot of truth to it, but it's also pissing people off, and their response to that is justifiable. But it's also maybe from the perspective that what he's saying is not entirely true, or it's not fair. But I guess the reality is that they are taking him down because he said things that they don't appreciate. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are always two sides to every story here. Um, I do
Yes.
believe that in regards to the situation with what's been happening in large around the world for the last few years, it's been a case where certain people in power don't actually want the truth to come out, and this is an information war. And I think now I think about it, I do tend to side with the fact that someone is saying something that is offensive doesn't mean it's not true. The fact that is someone's saying something that makes you want to cancel them, that they shouldn't be saying, doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that is still valid. It's still a valid point. So I guess I've already answered. Like I'm speaking extemporaneously here, and I don't even know the real answer. But as I'm speaking, I feel like I've already arrived at it, which is that the reality is he's saying they're both in both situations, they're saying shit that is true, and that's why they've been canceled. If there was no element of truth to any of what they were saying, they'd just be ignored, right?
Yeah, I feel there's we need to sort of separate the concepts of offensiveness, truth, and cancelability. You can say something that's really offensive and also really true, and you can get cancelled for it. You can say things that are true and aren't at all offensive, but still get cancelled for it. You can say things that are extremely offensive and aren't even true, that are just inappropriate, offensive things to say, and you can get cancelled for them. So simply being cancelled doesn't mean what you're saying or not is true. Likewise, if it's offensive or not, that doesn't mean whether or not it's true. You can say a truth or a lie in beautiful language, or you can say it in filthy gutter talk, but it doesn't make a difference. A lie is still a lie, and a truth is still a truth, regardless of what they say about it.
Oh, that is going to be it's going to be a clip. That's a salient point, bro, because that surmises how I feel about the truth movement right now. There is definitely a lot of shit that is truthful in regards to what is being disseminated, but there's also a lot of bullshit out there, like you and I are sure aware of. People on both sides often spout out ridiculous things. There's certain theories that I don't even think are theories. I think they're just poorly concocted delusions. Like there are a lot of flat earthers out there. Sorry, flat earthers. You need to learn more about what's going on in the world. There are a lot of people that buy into things, and then there are certain people that have researched basically nothing and come out with conspiracies that like they show a very lack of foundational understanding about what's going on. And then there are people like Alex Jones that know so much, right? But then they see this thing that's happened so many times that they assume that everything that it must, for instance, with the whole like Alex Jones's attitude is that because the government has lied in so many situations, the CIA, yeah, he understands his history better than anyone I know, right? Because they've done this shit all the time, anything that comes out from them must be bullshit. Now, having that attitude can get you into a lot of trouble as well. Just because someone has a history of lying and lying and lying and lying doesn't mean it's kind of like the opposite of the boy who cried. Well, it is the boy who cried wolf, right? Yeah, because it's like
Hmm.
you've lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. It doesn't mean that what you say is going to be, yeah, it is not going to be the, you know what I'm trying to say here, right?
Yeah,
And what,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I mean, it's even a thing in law, like it's recognized as like a psychological bias that if someone is caught lying, then you're more inclined to think they're lying. But in
absolutely.
court, they actually have something called, I think it's called the Lucas direction, I believe, where if a person as like a defendant has been caught lying in any of their statements, the judge will direct the jury and say, even though this person has been caught lying, don't
Yeah.
assume they're guilty. Don't assume that they're lying about
Oh,
everything
I'm glad.
else.
I thought the judge was going to go in the
Mm.
opposite direction because my attitude is that everyone lies in given certain situations, but it's the people that have no respect for authenticity in any situation, right? Because I use the classic example. If the government's trying to forcibly kill me, right, mandate me to go fucking conscription, whereas like some people lied about their age in the First or Second World War, right, to go and actually fight, to do something that was admirable, you can inversely say that it is justifiably right for you to lie about your age, not to fucking go and fight, right? Like, for instance, the conscription coming up. I mean, if we based off of the last World War standards, anyone between 18 and 41, that's both of us, has to may be conscripted. This is the youth to go and fight in this war, right? Now, I don't know about you, but there is no fucking way I'm going to go and kill innocent people. If I have to lie, right, in a situation like that, perfectly permissible, right? With that as a basis, there are certain situations that are perfectly acceptable to lie about. So the idea of saying, well, you've lied about this thing, therefore I can't trust anything you say now, is just as stupid as saying that, look, you lie about everything, so everything that comes out of your mouth must be a lie. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Because I think
Yeah,
people have to be a bit more perspicacious about the circumstances to a situation to try to assimilate what is really going on. And a lot of times I feel like both sides just play this game of, well, it has to be this way because, look, this has been the precedent in the past.
absolutely. And it's just it's simply seeing the nuance in every situation, and unconscious biases. I mean, unconscious biases become like a sort of a quote unquote woke buzzword these days, because it has just sort of been used by HR to sort of for box ticking of diversity drives and whatnot. But actual unconscious biases are a thing that based on our experience, whether that's with the world in general. I mean, if it's with a specific individual, if a person is caught lying, you might assume that they're lying. But that's it's almost like a form of logical fallacy. It's something that we need to sort of overcome our own cognitive limits, and be self-aware about our own cognitive limits. And through that, we can become so much more knowledgeable and so much more powerful, and make the right decisions, and the world will be a better place as a result of it.
Absolutely. And I think you are the perfect example of that. King Peter the Virile, I got to say, man, as a Generation Z man, you definitely do represent your generation extremely well, man. You're highly researched, highly perspicacious. I didn't even properly introduce you before, by the way. I forgot to tell people you're basically a lawyer now. I don't know if you passed the bar, but you have a degree, political commentator, content creator. I know you're getting back to your channel, KPTV, King Peter the Virile. Check it out. This guy is all over the interwebs. I would like to see you posting more content, man. I know it's
It's
kind of
been a
hard. We all
while.
got it.
It's been a long time. But
Absolutely.
I do plan on I got other things on my plate. I'm sort of dishing up right now, but the channel is not dead. I can't give a date necessarily on when there's anything to be expected, but there will be something probably. I've got a number of pies that are sort of in the long term oven on that front. But at the moment, it's just a case of the time will come. The time will come. But for now, I'm sort of laying a little bit dormant at the
Sure.
moment. But the
Well,
time will come. The time will
no
come.
doubt. Well, I'm going to chop up a lot of the clips from this long stream, so I'll send it your way if you want to put any of the stuff up on your channel. But absolutely, that I'd love that. If you want to put the whole thing, that's cool too. But bro, I'm trying to do this on the regular. I'm focusing more on my music this year. A lot of people don't wear. The last few years have been the most challenging for me. Obviously for everyone, but I actually had most people wouldn't have noticed it, but I had a vocal condition, so I couldn't speak as much as I wanted to, couldn't sing as much as I wanted to. But my voice is pretty much almost full strength now, so I'm actually focusing more on my singing. I have an album coming out, like I told you. This is kind of like taking the backstage, but I still enjoy doing these things. So I'm still trying to do them at least once a month. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be putting out the truth bombs. I want to be getting some big speakers this year. There are a lot of topics that I love to delve into. This has been more kind of like a down to earth conversation, but I'm sure you guys are all aware of, I go deep into the esoteric, conspiratorial, spiritual, metaphysical scene as well. I got some big names that I want to actually hit up this year because there's a lot of fascinating things that are going on in the UFO scene in regards to David Grush, in regards to some of my favorite authors and public speakers delving into the origins of humanity and a whole bunch of fascinating areas dealing with the secret origins of mankind and what goes on in the CIA and all the fascinating things that give us a broader understanding of this Euclidean meat space reality and illuminate our minds. Um, King Peter, it has been a pleasure. I wanted this to go for 2 hours. We've gone into about 2.5 hours now. I actually got to jump on to do take some calls, and do some IT stuff, working from home today. So I got to let you go. But thank you so much, brother. It's been an absolute pleasure. Always enjoy these conversations. I think we got through most of the stuff, and I'd love to do this again at some point, man. Hopefully, I think I should be able to get this one up on YouTube. I don't think we covered anything that was too controversial here. So please, YouTube, be
I think we're
friendly to
safe.
me. Yeah. And
It's
yeah,
always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
likewise, as I always like to say, ladies and gentlemen, remember there are three things that cannot remain hidden for long: the sun, the moon, and the wisdomatic truth bombs of the chocolate Nubian soul brother and King Peter the
I
Virile.
second that.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Take
All right,
care.
all
Bye
right.
bye.
My man. Peace. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can find this podcast on the iTunes, on the Spotify's. It's all over the interwebs. You'll find some clips on the TikToks. Check us out on the TikToks, and let us know if you want to hear some more podcasts with certain figures. I plan on interviewing some big names this year, so hit us up if you know anyone that would like to come on the podcast or you think would be a great conversation. Until next time, peace out, keep it real, don't drive and text, and kisses, hugs, and belly rubs, as I like to say. Signing out, your boy.
We gather around the podcast mic, open minds in the place, discussing freedom, society, technology, and all things esoteric. Unraveling the mystery, seeking deeper understanding through the knowledge we transmit. We ignite the conscious brand. Walk to the Christian journey, come on and listen in. Open up your mind, find your truth, let the knowledge begin. From the streets to the cosmos, we explore what's unseen. Through the words we speak, sparks of wisdom intervene. Yeah, the Christian journey, let the wisdom flow. Taking steps to elevate, together we will grow. From the third eye perspective, we dissect the truths and lies in this conscious connect. In the multiverse's archive where secrets reside, Christian's podcast, a conscious guide. From the depths of history to the crypto tide, he unveils the truths that many hide. Christian, the sage of sacred mysteries, guardian of freedom, unlocking esoteric histories. In the podcast realm where wisdom's unfurled, he's a purveyor of truths from the underworld. From the creator of Bitcoin to David Icke, the guests are diverse, wisdom they spike. So tune in, seekers of the cosmos unknown. In the Christian journey, consciousness is grown. Welcome to the Christian journey, come on and listen in. Open up your mind, find your truth, let the knowledge begin. From the streets to the cosmos, we explore what's unseen. Through the words we speak, sparks of wisdom intervene. Yeah, the Christian journey, let the wisdom flow. Taking steps to elevate, together we will grow.